I thought credit was just for people with money. Turns out, it was keeping me out of housing, jobs, everything. She was a first-gen college student with ramen, roommates, and rejection letters. 3 years later, I've got a 701 score, and my name on the lease in New York City. Credit is a system, and she hacked it. Money 101 Mondays. Full episode, now, playing on Dollar by Dollar. Watch the full story, building credit from scratch. It was supposed to be a good day. The sun had clawed its way through the heavy Los Angeles marine layer, pouring soft light through the grimy dorm window. Daniela Ruiz sat cross-legged on the lower bunk, a half-drunk mug of instant coffee balanced dangerously on a stack of overdue textbooks. Her roommate had already left for her morning psych lab. The room was quiet, too quiet, maybe, but Daniela liked it that way. For a few minutes each morning, it felt like the world paused just long enough for her to catch her breath. She reached for the envelope on her desk, the one with the red seal in the top left corner. She already knew what it said, but she opened it anyway. Dear Miss Ruiz, we regret to inform you that based on the credit history provided, she didn't read the rest. Her eyes had stopped on the first phrase, based on the credit history, as if that explained it, as if that made sense. Daniela wasn't being denied a credit card because she had bad credit. She was being denied because she had no credit. Nothing. Zero. A blank slate. No history. No cosigner. No safety net. Just a name. And the shadow of a 524 score she'd seen once when she downloaded Credit Karma in the library out of curiosity. The truth was, she hadn't even wanted the credit card. Not really. But the emails had made it sound easy. Just fill out the application, and poof, more flexibility. More space to breathe. More of a buffer between her and the constant question. What happens if the meal plan runs out before Friday? She folded the letter carefully, like it was delicate. Like rejection was something you handled gently, so it didn't tear. Then she placed it on top of her growing pile. Third one this semester. It was only October. Daniela's parents didn't talk about credit growing up. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know how. Her father, Armando, worked construction jobs under the table. Her mother, Rosa, cleaned houses in Culver City and took the bus home every night with aching knees and plastic bags full of discounted vegetables. They paid for things with cash, sometimes debit, if there was enough. But they'd never had a credit card, let alone a credit score. No one had explained to her how credit worked. Not in high school, not at orientation, not in her FAFSA portal, and definitely not in the financial aid line, where she'd stood for hours at the start of the semester trying to fix a housing error with her meal stipend. The girl behind the desk had barely made eye contact. Maybe call your bank, she'd said. Daniela didn't have a bank. Just a prepaid card with a $1.75 monthly fee and a maximum balance of $800. She rubbed her temple now, willing the headache away. It was always worse right behind her left eye. Tension, caffeine, worry. The rejection wasn't the part that stung the most. It was how normal it felt, how she was already getting used to it. Outside, the courtyard of the dorm buzzed with life. Students laughed, zipped by on scooters, debated philosophy readings over paper cups of cold brew. It was easy to pretend everything was fine if you didn't stop to count the overdrafts. Daniela slipped on her worn sneakers and headed to her work-study job in the library basement. She liked the quiet down there, the dusty shelves, the sense of order. You could stack books, check barcodes, shell by decimal points, and for a while, the world made sense. But lately, even the library wasn't safe from the noise in her head. She needed to figure this out. Fast. Because she had exactly $74.18 in her account. Rent on her off-campus room for next semester would be due soon. The deposit alone was $900. And landlords in Los Angeles didn't just want money. They wanted 700-plus credit score, 3 months income verification, and, worst of all, a cosigner, which she didn't have, which she wasn't going to have. Not from her parents. Not from anyone. That night, Daniela sat on the floor of her dorm room and opened her laptop. She typed into the search bar, how to build credit if you have none. And for the first time in weeks, something inside her shifted. Not hope. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, a place to start. The rabbit hole began with a Reddit thread, r/personal finance. A user had posted a simple question. Can I build credit with no history and no income? The top comment was brutally honest. No income equals hard. No history equals start with a secured card. Secured card. She clicked. It was a credit card you prepaid. You gave them $200, and that became your limit. You couldn't spend more than that, but they reported your payments to the credit bureaus just like a regular card. If you paid on time, didn't max it out, and kept your usage low, your score could go up. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't easy, but it was possible. She found a link to a student-friendly secured card with no annual fee. The minimum deposit was $200. Daniela's hands trembled slightly. She had $74 in her account, another $40 coming in from her next shift. If she skipped groceries, she might be able to make it work in 2 weeks. Might. She bookmarked the page and exhaled. This would be her first strategy, the first crack in the wall. She didn't tell anyone, not her roommate, not her mother on the weekly Sunday phone call, not even her favorite TA, who had once slipped her an extra snack voucher after noticing her lunch was just saltines and tea. This was Daniela's quiet mission. Build credit. Buy time. Prove to herself that she could. Because this wasn't just about number. It was about not being locked out of apartments. About not relying on sketchy sublets. About having options. About power. She started keeping a small spiral notebook labeled Plan, Credit, tucked in the side pocket of her backpack. Inside, she sketched out steps, made charts, listed due dates. She watched hours of YouTube videos, some helpful, some clickbait, and took notes like her GPA depended on it. She learned about credit utilization, about on-time payments, about how to request a limit increase without a hard inquiry. She learned how many points a single missed payment could cost, how closed accounts could hurt her score, even if she paid in full, how lenders used formulas she couldn't see to judge whether she was trustworthy. It felt rigged, and maybe it was, but she'd been navigating rigged systems her whole life. From ESL classes in first grade to every honors track she fought to enter in high school despite guidance counselors who barely remembered her name. This was just another gate, and she would find a way through it. 2 weeks later, she hit her goal, $212.53, enough for the deposit and a little buffer. She applied for the secured card after midnight. Heart pounding, hands cold, and when the approval email came 3 days later, she didn't scream or dance or cry. She just nodded once and wrote in her notebook, Step 1 approved. But she didn't know it yet, that this card would be more than just a piece of plastic. It would be her first line of credit, her first proof that she could rewrite the rules, her first taste of control, and also her first mistake. But that part comes later. For now, there was a card in the mail, and a quiet promise, whispered in the dark. I'm going to figure this out. When the envelope arrived, Daniela stared at it for a solid minute before opening it. The weight of it felt significant, like something ceremonial. She turned it over in her hands, studying the embossed logo of the bank, the perforated edge, the cautionary instructions not to bend. Her name, D. Ruiz, was printed in neat black ink across the front. There was a kind of dignity in that, a kind of recognition. She slit the envelope open with the edge of a mechanical pencil. Inside was her very first credit card, a thin, matte rectangle of possibility. Shiny modest. No fancy design. No rewards program. But hers. It hummed in her hand like a secret she didn't know how to tell anyone. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at it for a long time. This was going to be the start of everything she never had. Activating the card was easy. It took less than 2 minutes on the bank's app. A few taps, a security code, a moment of hesitation when she saw the words, available balance, $200. Then it was done. She expected something dramatic. A chime, a message from the universe. But all she got was a push notification. Congratulations. Your card is now ready for use. That night, she logged the event in her spiral notebook. October 22nd, card active. Start tracking. She added 2 more lines. Rule 1, never use more than $40 per month. Rule 2, always pay before due date. She underlined both. Twice. She'd read it again and again on forums and videos. Keep utilization under 20%. Pay on time. It wasn't enough just to have credit. You had to manage it. Nurture it. Prove you weren't a risk. It made her angry if she thought too long about it. That the burden of proof was always on people like her. That she had to perform financial trustworthiness in a system designed for people born with it. But rage didn't raise credit scores. So she kept the spiral open and made a list of safe purchases. Metro Tap, card refill. Grocery store staples, rice, eggs, beans. School printing credits. Emergency meds. She set her first goal: use the card once a week. Never more than $10 at a time. Pay it back within 5 days. She was building credit. Carefully. Quietly. Like a house of cards. And she was proud of that. Until the email came. It was the end of November, and finals week was barreling toward her like a train. Her eyes were bleary from late nights and cheap coffee. She hadn't called home in days. Her financial aid for the spring semester had hit a weird delay, and her work-study hours had been cut due to budget caps. The number in her checking account, $8.41. She tried not to look at it anymore. She was eating oatmeal twice a day, borrowing library chargers when hers started fraying, scraping by. When her roommate asked if she wanted to pitch in for takeout during a study session, just a split pizza, Daniela said yes before her brain caught up. Because she was hungry. Because she was tired. Because it was only $13.98. And she had the card. She told herself she'd pay it off in 2 days max, as soon as her refund check came. But it didn't. Not in 2 days. Not in 5. Not even a week. She paid late. Only $15. Enough to cover the charge. But it was 6 days past the due date. She told herself it wasn't a big deal. It was one mistake. One human moment. The app disagreed. Her score dropped 41 points. From 524 to 483. It was like watching the floor vanish beneath her. She didn't cry right away. She just sat there in the campus library, lit by the blue glow of her laptop screen, her body suddenly frozen as the number glared back at her. It was the kind of number you read about in cautionary tales. The kind landlords flagged in red ink. The kind that could haunt you for years. And the part that hit the hardest? She had no one to blame but herself. She'd made the rules. She'd broken them. And the system didn't care why. She closed the laptop and walked home in the rain. No umbrella. No jacket. Just the sting of it. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the last 2 weeks like a reel she couldn't shut off. She thought about the rejection letters. The time she scraped together $212 with nickels and dreams just to open the account. The pizza. The promises. The drop. She hated herself for being careless. For being normal. For needing something she couldn't afford and saying yes anyway. But somewhere between shame and silence, something else stirred. Resolve. Because this was what they didn't teach you when you were first gen. That one mistake wouldn't kill your future. But ignoring it might. She got out of bed, opened her notebook, and flipped to a clean page. Damage control plan. 1. Call credit card company. Ask for goodwill adjustment. 2. Set auto payment minimum. Always. 3. Use calendar alerts. 4. Do not close account. Keep it alive. 5. Track spending. Every single day. She underlined that last one 5 times. She wasn't giving up. She was learning. And the lesson cost her 41 points. But not her dignity. The next day, she did something she never thought she would. She walked in a credit union on campus. It was small, with carpet that smelled like old popcorn and a row of outdated pamphlets about retirement plans. She sat across from a woman in a gray blazer who looked like someone's aunt. "Hi," Daniela said, voice too small. "I need to know how to fix my credit." The woman blinked, then smiled. "Let's talk." For the next hour, Daniela learned things she'd never heard in 18 years of public school. That payment history made up 35% of your credit score. That even one 30-day late payment could take years to erase. That secured cards were a good start, but you could also build credit through credit builder loans, rent reporting services, and even phone bill histories. That closing account hurt your score. That credit wasn't just a number. It was a map, a slow-building portrait of your financial trust. The woman gave her a handout. Steps to rebuild. The first-year path. Daniela clutched it like scripture. By the time finals ended, she had a new system in place. Her card was set to auto-pay $25 a month, regardless of balance. She checked her account every morning, just a quick scan with her coffee. She used her card only once a week for one thing: groceries. And she never spent more than she had in checking. She downloaded a free spreadsheet template and color-coded it. Blue for income, red for fixed expenses, green for variable. And she made a new section in her notebook: wins. Every payment on time. Every balance, under 20%. Every month she didn't miss. Because recovery, she realized, wasn't a sprint. It was reputation. It was consistency. It was boring. But it worked. And even though she still lived off instant rice and scratched notes, something had changed. She didn't feel powerless anymore. She felt like a player. A beginner, sure, but in the game. Because even at 483, she was building. She wasn't just surviving college anymore. She was learning the rules no one had given her, and rewriting her story, mistake by mistake. The email arrived at 2:14 a.m., like most things that change her life. Daniela had just finished revising her final paper for sociology, 12 pages of dissecting urban inequality through a Marxist lens, and was mindlessly clicking through emails while eating dry cereal from the box. Her roommate was asleep, headphones on, curled beneath a mountain of thrifted blankets. The subject line glowed at her in bold. Your 2024 to 25 FAFSA application has been processed. For most students, this was routine, an administrative detail, a checkmark. For Daniela, it was everything. She clicked fast, heart thudding. FAFSA was more than a form. It was her entire lifeline. Her family didn't have savings. There were number 529 plans, no generational safety nets. FAFSA was the difference between a semester of progress or a semester stuck working 2 jobs in the hot kitchens of East LA to save up enough to re-enroll. She skimmed the document like it was a winning lottery ticket. Expected family contribution, $0. Good. Pell Grant, confirmed. Cal Grant, pending. Then her eyes froze. Unsubsidized Stafford loan, $3,500. Subsidized Stafford loan, $2,000. Parent Plus loan, denied. The blood drained from her face. Parent Plus loan, denied. Again, just like last year. Because her father didn't have a social security number. Because the system had built-in walls that didn't care about your GPA, or your hustle, or the fact that you were the first in your family to even get this far. She knew this moment well. The FAFSA gods giveth, and they taketh away. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. She'd done everything right. Submitted the forms early, checked her emails daily, followed every instruction in the online workshops and seminars. She'd called the hotline twice, waited on hold for nearly an hour each time, just to make sure everything was in order. But none of that mattered when your reality didn't fit the template. Her parents couldn't co-sign anything. They couldn't verify income through W-2s they didn't have. Her mother had been paid in cash for years, cleaning homes under the table. Her father did roofing for a subcontractor who paid him on Thursdays in a white envelope. Try explaining that to a federal form. Try inputting survival into a box that only accepted digits. Daniela closed the laptop and leaned back against the wall, cereal box slipping from her hands. Pieces scattered across the floor like confetti at a party she hadn't been invited to. For a long time, she just sat there, eyes open, completely still. Morning came like a slap. Her phone buzzed with a reminder. Work-study shift, 9 a.m. She'd barely slept, but she got dressed anyway. Pulled on the same hoodie. Scraped her hair into a bun. Pushed through the fatigue. The library basement felt colder than usual. She reshelved returns, scanned barcodes, and tried not to think. But the FAFSA email looped through her mind like a cursed refrain. She needed answers. Options. Anything. By her break, she was back on the phone, this time calling the financial aid office. Hi, this is Daniela Ruiz. I'm a second year. My Parent Plus loan was denied again, and Can you hold, please? She held. For 12 minutes. The voice came back flat. Hi, yes. It looks like your parent doesn't meet the requirements. Unfortunately, that loan won't process. You may be eligible for an additional unsubsidized amount. How much? An extra $1,000 or so. Her rent alone for next semester was $1,100. Daniela thanked her quietly, hung up, and sat with her back against the bookshelf marked 330.1, Income Inequality. The irony wasn't lost on her. That night, she called her mom. Hola, Mija, Rosa said, cheerful as ever. How's school? You eating enough? Do you need shampoo? I saw a coupon. Ma, Daniela interrupted gently. The loan was denied again. Rosa fell silent. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, baby, she said at last. We don't have. I know. It's okay. I just wanted to tell you. Daniela didn't mean to make her feel guilty. That was the last thing she wanted. Her mother had done everything: scrub bathtubs, bend over floors, sacrifice dreams so Daniela could have hers. But the machine didn't recognize that kind of labor. It only saw numbers. And hers were always the wrong kind. She spent the next week searching for alternatives. She looked into emergency grants, applied for 3 obscure scholarships with deadlines that night. She considered crowdfunding, but the thought of asking strangers for money felt humiliating. She wasn't trying to chase a dream. She was just trying to keep going. Finally, she landed on a strategy she hadn't wanted to consider. Private loans. Not ideal. The interest rates were higher. Approval was harder. But she didn't need much. Just enough to cover housing and books. Maybe $3,000. So she opened the application. First question: do you have a cosigner? She hovered over the no option and clicked it. Next screen: sorry. Based on your credit profile, we are unable to process your request. She stared. It was over before it began. The door slammed shut. Credit score: 483. No cosigner. No chance. This was the moment it hit her. Credit wasn't just about credit cards or rent deposits. It was about access, freedom, the ability to choose, to pivot, to plan, to avoid desperation. And without it, you weren't just stuck, you were invisible. Later that week, she met with her advisor. Dr. Patel was one of the few professors who really took time, with first-gen students. I'm hitting a wall, Daniela admitted, eyes glassy. I can't get more aid. My score tanked. I might have to drop out for a semester. Dr. Patel leaned back, thoughtful. You've done a lot right, Daniela. But you're trying to outrun a machine. Maybe you need to outsmart it instead. Daniela looked up. What do you mean? Build credit with what you already have. Report your rent. Report your utilities. Open a credit builder loan. Think of your profile like a resume. If they won't give you one, write your own. It sounded impossible, but also logical, strategic, worth trying. That night, she found a site that offered rent reporting, for a monthly fee, of course, because nothing in the credit world was truly free. She hesitated, then signed up. Her landlord was skeptical, but agreed to verify her payments. She linked her phone bill, her student Wi-Fi. Then she applied for something called a credit builder loan through her campus credit union. It was a strange concept. You borrowed $500, but they held it in a locked savings account until you finished making monthly payments toward it. Once complete, you got the money back and built payment history in the process. Risk-free, but still a commitment. She signed up. $27.92 per month. She added it to her budget spreadsheet and gave a gold star. And slowly, painfully slowly, her report started to grow. Not much, but enough for a sliver of belief. One afternoon in early February, Daniela checked her Credit Karma out of habit. Her heart stopped. 503. Over 500. For the first time, it felt like cresting a wave after nearly drowning for months. She didn't celebrate. Not with noise. Not with posts. She just closed her laptop, placed her palm flat on the cover, and whispered, "I'm not going anywhere." Because that was the truth of it. For people like Daniela, financial progress wasn't glamorous. It wasn't about windfalls or promotions. It was boring, tedious, stubborn. But every point on that score now had a story behind it. A battle fought and won. And she was still here, still climbing. Because even in a system built to shut her out, she'd found cracks and planted seeds. By the time spring semester began, Daniela Ruiz was no longer the same student who had quietly unboxed her first credit card in the fall. She walked differently now, shoulders just slightly straighter, gaze a little steadier. Not because life had gotten easier. If anything, it had become harder. But because she had begun to understand something critical. No one was coming to save her. And weirdly, that truth didn't break her. It focused her. When you've grown up knowing every grocery run required coupons and mental math, when your childhood Saturdays were spent cleaning houses alongside your mother rather than playdates at the park, you don't expect comfort. You expect resistance. And you learn to push anyway. This semester, Daniela didn't just attend classes. She engineered her survival like a second major. Her spreadsheet was no longer just a place to track spending. It was a blueprint. She color-coded her life. Blue for fixed expenses, orange for academic obligations, green for side hustles, red for warning signs. Her Budget 2.0 tab had formulas she taught herself from Reddit threads and TikTok videos. She had pivoted hard into multiple streams of income because the math demanded it. Her work-study job in the library only brought in about $400 a month, barely enough to cover groceries and her Metro pass. So she looked for work that could be done on her terms, around her class schedule, and with as few upfront costs as possible. She started small, tutoring a freshman in Spanish for $15 an hour, translating flyers for local businesses in Koreatown that catered to Spanish-speaking families, reselling secondhand textbooks on campus forums. Nothing stable, nothing glamorous, but it added up. She tracked every dollar. Every dollar had a job. Then came the gig economy. Daniela signed up to deliver food via a campus-friendly app that didn't require a car. She could use her old mountain bike, the same one she'd gotten at a garage sale back in high school, and hustle deliveries after class and on weekends. The first few weeks were brutal. Riding up and down the hills near Westwood with a backpack full of lukewarm ramen and acai bowls tested her body in ways she hadn't expected. She nearly fainted once after climbing a long incline with a 40-ounce green smoothie bouncing against her back. But when she transferred her first $87 payout from the app to her checking account, she cried. Not because it was enough, but because it was hers. But side hustles weren't just about money. They were about time. Time was Daniela's most fragile resource. Between full-time classes, late-night studying, and her patchwork jobs, she was burning the candle from every angle. There were days she operated on 3 hours of sleep, days when she forgot to eat, days when she questioned if all of this grind, this strategy, this hunger, was even worth it. She kept a small note taped inside her wallet, just behind her student ID. It said, "This is the hardest it will ever be. Keep going." It wasn't from anyone. She wrote herself. But it reminded her, every time she reached for her debit card, that this chapter wasn't her whole story, just the upper part. Meanwhile, her credit score inched upward, slowly, painfully, but steadily. Her new strategy, combining a credit builder loan, rent reporting, and small, regular purchases on her secured card, was working. Her on-time payments were adding weight to her file. Her credit utilization was never above 10%. By March, she was at 529, still low, but no longer a ghost in the system. She learned about a concept called credit age, how the longer you keep an account open, the more trustworthy you appear. So she resolved to never close her first secured card, no matter what. Even if she graduated, even if she hit 800 someday, that card would stay open. It was her foundation. One evening, while reviewing her spreadsheet at the dining hall, she overheard a classmate complaining loudly. "My Discover card just gave me a limit increase. I didn't even ask. Ugh, I hate that. It messes with my debt-to-income ratio." Daniela blinked. An unrequested limit increase? She hadn't even considered that as a possibility. Back in her dorm that night, she opened the app for her secured card and clicked through to customer service chat. "Hi," she typed. "I've been making on-time payments for 4 months. Is it possible to request a limit increase?" The reply came a minute later. "Because your account is secured, any increase would require an additional deposit." She hesitated. She didn't have an extra $100 lying around, but maybe she could plan for it. She added it to her budget goals. Deposit $100 to secure a limit increase by May. Because a higher limit would lower her utilization ratio. And that meant more growth. More points. More proof. By now, Daniela's notebook had grown fat with tabs and scribbled tips. She called it her money manual. Inside were clippings from articles, handwritten explanations of terms like soft inquiry and installment credit, and a section labeled language of the system. Because that was what credit really was, a language. A coded dialect of finance that no one in her world had ever taught her. But she was learning. She could now translate FICO 8 like a second tongue. She could explain the difference between revolving and installment accounts without blinking. She knew which credit bureaus mattered and how to dispute an error if one ever appeared. This knowledge was power, and it didn't come from textbooks. It came from desperation, from hunger, from fire. Still, the weight of it all was starting to show. Her friends noticed she looked tired. Her mom began asking if she was sick. Even her professors, those who paid attention, began to pull her aside. "You don't have to do everything," Dr. Patel said gently one afternoon. Daniela smiled faintly. "But I do," she replied. And she meant it. Because while others had parents who could spot them rent or co-sign a lease, or even just explain the mysteries of a credit score, Daniela had her spiral notebook and her will. In late March, she took a weekend off for the first time since winter break. Not because she wanted to, because she had to. Her body gave out. Fever. Dizziness. Her bike lay untouched by the dorm wall. Her delivery bag, unopened. She slept for 14 hours straight, then cried in the shower. Not from pain, but from relief. And that's when the thought hit her. What if hustle couldn't save her? What if systems needed a change too? It was a scary thought, because it meant that even her best effort might never be enough. But it was also freeing, because it gave her permission to rest, even if only for a weekend. On Sunday night, she sat in the campus cafe, drinking cheap chamomile tea and revisiting her goals. She didn't delete any of them, but she did add a new one. Protect your energy. Rest is strategic, because she realized that this wasn't just about surviving. It was about sustaining, about building a version of herself that didn't just endure, but thrived. Eventually, by April, she was at 556. Not a miracle, but progress. Every point felt like a brick, stacking, framing the life she was quietly designing. One late payment had cost her 41 points, but her new habits had earned back 73. And counting. She wasn't done. She was just getting started. Summer was coming fast. The kind of Southern California summer that baked the sidewalks and made the city smell like car exhaust and street tacos. The kind of summer that made dorms unbearable and empty campus apartments vanish like cold water in the sun. And for Daniela Ruiz, summer wasn't just a season. It was a deadline. Because her student housing would end in June. Her roommate was moving back to San Diego. And Daniela? She had nowhere to go. Her plan had always been to find off-campus housing, something cheap and small, a shared room, maybe, or a mother-in-law unit behind someone's garage. She couldn't afford to be picky. She just needed a roof, a lock, and a place close enough to bike to campus and far enough to not cost half her loan disbursement. She started early. March, then April. Craigslist, Facebook, university housing boards. And every time she found something remotely affordable, she saw the same words. Must have credit score 650 plus. Proof of income and cosigner required. First month plus last plus security. She'd scroll past pictures of modest kitchens and cracked tile floors and feel her chest tighten. $1,050 a month. Share bathroom. Tiny fridge. Still out of reach. Still behind a locked door. And she didn't have a key. Daniela's credit score had finally climbed to 561. Not bad. Not good. Just somewhere in that muddy middle where you're not a risk, but not yet a reward. She had enough in her checking account, barely, to float a deposit if she cut every other corner. But she had no cosigner. And that was the hardest part. It wasn't just about money. It was about the assumption that someone else would vouch for you. That you came from backing. From trust. From capital. Emotional or otherwise. But Daniela had no one to list. No rich uncle. No godparent. No family friend with a clean record and a kind heart. She had a spreadsheet. And grit. In early May, she found a listing that seemed almost possible. Shared 2-bedroom apartment, Palms neighborhood. $875 per month. Utilities included. Female tenants only. It was still a stretch, but if she kept delivering food all summer, dropped one class, and took on tutoring hours, she might make it work. She texted the number. The reply came fast. Come by Thursday, 5 p.m. Bring ID, credit report, and income docs. Her stomach twisted. She knew how these things went. She'd walk in. They'd take one look at her printout. See the 561 score. The patchwork income. The single name on the form. And smile the kind of smile that says, no, before you've even finished talking. But she printed everything anyway. Clean, sharp fonts. Paper-clipped. Annotated. Her full story in black and white. She even added a cover page titled, Application Supplement. Context and explanation. It wasn't asked for, but she needed them to understand. This score didn't mean she was irresponsible. It meant she was building. The apartment was small and sunlit. Lived in, but clean. A calendar with kittens on the fridge. A vase of fake flowers on the coffee table. The kind of place where you could imagine boiling pasta at 2 a.m. and calling it home. The landlord was a woman in her early 50s, red glasses, firm handshake. Daniela, right? She said, flipping through a clipboard. Student. Yes. Going into my third year. Sociology. The woman nodded. I like student tenants. You're usually focused. Quiet. She gestured to the couch. Tell me about your situation. So Daniela did. She explained everything. Her work-study job, the delivery gigs, the tutoring. She mentioned her financial aid, her class schedule, her plans to go to grad school. She handed over her paperwork, carefully arranged. The woman flipped through it silently, lips pressed tight. Then she looked up. I'll be honest, she said. Your credit's on the low end, and you don't have a cosigner. Daniela nodded. She'd expected that. But, the woman continued, you've clearly done your homework. Most applicants don't include a cover letter. Daniela laughed nervously. It's just context. People see the number and assume the worst. The woman leaned back. Well, here's what I can do, she said. If you're willing to pay a double deposit, $1, $7.50 up front, I'll consider waiving the cosigner. Daniela blinked. That was almost everything she had. She could do it. Barely. But it meant wiping out her summer cushion. No emergencies. No margin. Still, it was a roof. And her own name on the lease. She swallowed. I can do that. She moved in 3 weeks later. The apartment wasn't perfect. The Wi-Fi was spotty. The walls were thin. The neighbors smoked on the balcony. But it was hers. She had a key. A mailbox with her name. An address to list on forms. And for the first time since coming to college, Daniela felt like she had staked a flag. Like she had carved out space in a city that never really felt like hers. She celebrated quietly. A frozen pizza, a rented movie, and a text to her mom. I got the place. No cosigner. Just me. Rosa replied instantly. Estoy tan orgullosa de ti, amiga. I'm so proud of you. The next day, Daniela opened her budgeting spreadsheet and added a new tab. Apartment expenses. She input the rent, utilities, and a new line item called emergency buffer. She was down to $61.42 in her checking account. But she wasn't afraid. She'd built this. Piece by piece. Credit card. Loan. Budget. Hustle. Strategy. And now, her first lease. It wasn't luck. It was labor. And it was working. But she wasn't done. Because now came the next level. Financial consistency. Could she hold the line? Could she stay current? Could she grow this credit profile without burning out? She wasn't sure. But she had a plan. And that, she'd learned, was half the battle. One night in early June, as she lay on her new mattress on the floor, Daniela checked her credit score. It had ticked up again. 569. She smiled, turned off her phone, and whispered, I live here now. And meant it. The first bill from the apartment came 2 weeks after move-in. Electricity, $64.12. Internet, $45. Shared water and trash, flat fee of $40. Total, $149.12. Daniela stared at the number on the page, trying to keep her hands from shaking. It wasn't that she hadn't expected the bills. She'd budgeted down to the cent. It was the realization that there would be no recovery time. No gap. No reset. Just a constant state of balancing. Survive the rent. Prep for the next. Hustle. Pay. Hustle again. This was adulthood. Or at least her version of it. A marathon of urgency. She opened her laptop and updated the spreadsheet. Her checking account, after rent and groceries, had just $73.20. Her credit card limit, still secured, sat untouched at $200, with a current balance of $14.83 from a recent grocery run. She'd promised herself not to go over $40 on it, no matter what. To keep the utilization below 20%. The number itself didn't matter. It was the ratio. That was the lesson she'd learned the hard way. The lesson she paid for in points. But this month, it felt like the margin was mocking her. She needed shampoo, a replacement bus pass, and a textbook she couldn't find used online. And it was only June 10th. Daniela tried to breathe. She'd been here before, just in different forms. When the school lunch account ran dry in 10th grade, and the cafeteria lady gave her a peanut butter sandwich with a tight-lipped apology. When she'd worn the same jeans for 3 days in middle school because the washer at home broke, and the laundromat was too expensive that week. When the FAFSA form had asked for numbers she didn't know how to get. Financial stress wasn't new. But this level of detail, this constant negotiation with numbers, it was exhausting. She was surviving, but barely. One night, after a long delivery shift, Daniela pedaled home through a thick wave of humidity. Her thighs ached. Her backpack was soaked with sweat. She dropped her bike against the porch wall and climbed the stairs on sore legs, praying for quiet. Inside, she found a notice slipped under her door. Reminder: electricity bill past due. Due within 3 days to avoid service interruption. She blinked. No, that wasn't possible. She pulled out her folder of receipts, flipped to the tab marked Utilities, and confirmed her online payment date, June 4th. It should have posted. She logged in her banking app. There was the charge, but it was pending, not posted. And in the time between now and then, 2 small charges, a transit refill and a grocery run, had cleared first. Her utility payment bounced. The funds never left. And she'd never gotten an alert. She checked her email. Nothing in spam. She stared at the screen, her throat tight. Because now, on top of the unpaid bill, there was a $29 failed payment fee. And that $73 cushion? Gone. This was the part that no one taught you in financial literacy seminars. How $5 here, $12 there, and 1 day of payment lag could knock everything off balance. How, when you were living in the margins, one mistake, one technicality, could cost you more than you had. She called the electric company the next morning, voice shaking. I tried to pay. I have proof. I didn't know it hadn't cleared. The woman on the phone sighed. Ma'am, I understand. But we auto-cancel payments after 5 days if funds aren't confirmed. You'll need to pay the balance and the penalty. And it has to be in full. No extensions available this cycle. Daniela wanted to scream or cry. Instead, she thanked her, hung up, and sat on the floor of her apartment, her back against the fridge, phone still in hand. She stared at the ceiling, trying not to lose it, because losing it wouldn't pay the bill. She did what she always did. She made a list. Ways to cover $149.12 by Friday. Deliveries, 3 nights, goal $50 per night. Tutor Saturday morning, $30. Sell and use textbook, $20 maybe. Cancel July internet. Use campus Wi-Fi. Skip groceries this week. Eat rice, beans, eggs. She can make it work. Barely. But it would mean pushing her body even harder. Sleeping less. Studying while riding the bus. Answering messages mid-shift. Living on caffeine and adrenaline. Again. And this time, there was no cushion. Just cliffs on all sides. The next few days blurred. She rode 6 hours straight on Wednesday. Earned $54.97. Tried to sleep. Couldn't. Tutored a freshman in algebra on Thursday afternoon, even though her eyes kept twitching from exhaustion. Sold her spare psychology textbook to a freshman for $15, less than half what it was worth. By Friday, she had $122. Still short. She stared at her spreadsheet. Then, against every instinct, she opened her credit card app. Available balance. $185.17. She could pay the rest on the card. She hated the idea. Hated that her strategy, careful, cautious, calculated, was slipping. But what were the other options? Let the lights go off. Get hit with a second fee? Damage her payment history again? She hovered over the button and clicked. The payment cleared. The lights stayed on. Her score took a hit. Not much. Just a few points. Her utilization now sat at 42%. Double what she wanted. It would recover, eventually, but it was a painful reminder. Even the best laid plans can break under pressure. Even disciplined budgets can fall apart when timing and algorithms collide. Even heroes need a break. She updated her notebook. June 16th, paid bill. Over budget. Card at 42%. Cut spending. She underlined it. Twice. Then turned the page. And wrote something new. This can't just be survival. I need systems. Automation. Backups. That weekend, she made changes. She set up auto-pay minimums for her card. $1.25, always on the 5th. She linked her checking account to a separate prepaid card with $50. Emergency only. She started tracking posting times, not just payment dates. She watched how long each utility took to clear, how her income deposits staggered, which days her school hours dropped off. She wasn't just budgeting now. She was forecasting, not surviving, planning, because life on the cliff wasn't sustainable. She needed a bridge. By July, her credit score had dropped to 553. Not a disaster, but a bruise. She studied it like a surgeon, zooming into the app's detailed chart, identifying the spike, the dip, the exact week the balance crossed the line. And she swore, never again. This mistake wouldn't define her. It would educate her. She added a new tab to her spreadsheet. Triggers plus recovery plans. Trigger: utilization over 30%. Plan: cut charges for 2 cycles. Pay extra. Request CLI. Trigger: payment fails. Plan: build float fund, $200. Monitor clearing timeframes. Trigger: emotional fatigue. Plan: scheduled rest days. 1 weekend off per month. Because she was learning that resilience wasn't about pushing harder. It was about preparing smarter. On the last day of July, she sat at a campus coffee shop with her laptop, a black coffee, and her money manual notebook. She looked around at the other students, some scrolling, some laughing, some lost in midsummer reverie. She didn't envy them anymore. Not because her life was harder, but because she now knew something they didn't. That financial independence wasn't about income. It was about insight, awareness, control, and she was getting closer to it every day. She checked her score. 559. Back up 6 points. Small, but significant. Like breathing again after holding it underwater. She smiled, sipped her coffee, typed into her goals column, hit 600 by September, and whispered, "I'm still in this." Daniela hadn't checked her campus mailbox in weeks. Between work shifts, studying for finals, and her now obsessive credit tracking habits, the small square metal box tucked away in the lobby of the sociology building felt like an afterthought. It was mostly junk anyway. Flyers for club events she didn't attend, coupon booklets she couldn't afford to use, or once, inexplicably, a postcard from a graduate program in Scotland. But on a sweltering Tuesday in early August, she stopped. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was muscle memory. Maybe it was the way her bike chain had snapped on the way to campus, and the universe owed her a win. She opened the box. Inside was a single envelope. Thick, cream-colored, heavy paper. Return address: Office of Student Support Initiatives. She frowned. That wasn't financial aid. That wasn't anything she recognized. She slit the seal with her dorm key and pulled the letter out slowly, unfolding the trifold with hands still sticky from the heat. Her eyes fell to the first line. "Congratulations, Daniela Ruiz. You've been selected for the 2024 Persistence Grant." She froze. Persistence Grant? She kept reading. This need-based award recognizes students who demonstrate exceptional resilience, academic potential, and financial responsibility in the face of structural adversity. Your story, your progress, and your determination to remain enrolled while independently managing your finances have earned our attention and our support. The award includes a $3,000 tuition credit and a $1,500 housing stipend for the upcoming semester. Daniela blinked, then blinked again. She reread the entire page. Twice. Her breath caught in her throat. This couldn't be real. The paper fluttered in her shaking hands. $4,500. Not a loan. Not an installment plan. A grant. No repayment. No cosigner. Just help. Real, tangible help. She sat down hard on the concrete bench outside the building, the letter still open in her lap. Students passed by on scooters, laughing. A professor spilled iced coffee on the steps and swore under his breath. Somewhere, a bird chirped in a tree that had somehow survived 3 heat waves and 5 budget cuts. But in Daniela's world, everything went quiet. She had spent months budgeting her life down to the calorie. She had studied financial systems in YouTube videos like they were sacred texts. She had fought for every single dollar, every point of credit, every hour of sleep. And now this. She didn't cry. Not at first. But when she got home and laid the letter on her desk, next to her beat-up laptop and spreadsheet printouts, the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic, just a silent stream down her cheeks as she whispered over and over, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Later that night, she emailed the office listed on the letter. She didn't know what to say, so she just wrote the truth. "Dear Persistence Grant Committee, I'm not sure what I did to deserve this, but I want you to know I'm not wasting a cent. I'm going to finish this degree. I'm going to pay it forward. Thank you for seeing me." She hit send and sat in the dark, arms folded around her knees. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't look like a trap. It looked like a hallway, with light at the end. The grant money didn't fix everything. Her credit score was still in the high 500s. Her secured card still only had a $200 limit. Her delivery bike still squeaked every time she rounded the corner on Santa Monica Boulevard. But it gave her space, breathing room. She used $800 of the housing stipend to prepay part of her fall rent. That alone meant she wouldn't be scrambling in September. She used another $100 to bump her secured car deposit to $300, raising her limit. Utilization now felt easier to manage. She even treated herself to something unthinkable, a printer. A used $40 Canon model she found on Craigslist. Now she didn't have to beg the campus lab for print credits. It was a small thing, but it made her feel legitimate, like a real student, like someone who deserved to be here. With the extra time, she began mentoring other first-gen freshmen. Nothing official, just coffee chats, meetups in the library, DMs on group chats. She shared what she'd learned. How to apply for a secured card that reports to all 3 bureaus. How to automate minimum payments. How to build credit while still qualifying for financial aid. How to recover from a late payment without shame. How to write a landlord application that explains your situation instead of hiding it. And, slowly, people started listening, asking questions, passing along the advice. She'd become a kind of accidental expert, not because she set out to be, but because survival had made her one. In September, her score hit 587, then 594. Then, in mid-October, 601. She stared at the number on her screen and exhaled so deeply it rattled the dust on her windowsill. She crossed 600. She took a screenshot, printed it, taped it to her bedroom wall. Then she opened her spreadsheet and added a new section. Phase 2, from survive to thrive. And underneath that, she typed 3 new goals. Unsecured card approval. Credit score of 680 by graduation. First savings account. $1,000 emergency fund. She knew it would take time, but she also knew how to wait, and how to work, and how to climb. That weekend, she applied for her first unsecured student credit card. Just one, just to test the waters. She didn't expect much. But 3 days later, an email landed in her inbox. You've been approved. Limit, $500. APR, 23.99%. Terms, no annual fee. Daniela smiled. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't massive. But it wasn't secured. And it wasn't rejected. That was enough. She pulled out her spiral notebook, now fraying from overuse, and added a new entry. October 12th, approved for unsecured card. $500. Use carefully. Report progress. Never forget this when. She still lived frugally. Still biked. Still used coupons. Still clipped her ramen packets with a binder clip so they'd last 3 days instead of 2. But she no longer felt like a ghost in her own life. She had a lease, a support grant, 2 credit cards, a credit score that started with a 6, and a fire inside her that no algorithm could ever measure. One night, during midterms, Daniela sat at the library cafe with a new freshman she was mentoring. He looked nervous, fidgety, worried. I applied for a credit card and got denied, he said, voice low. I guess I'm just not good with money. Daniela leaned forward. Hey, she said, that's not what that means. He looked up. It means the system doesn't know you yet, but he can change that, one good decision at a time. She handed him a post-it note with a list. Credit Karma. Check weekly. Discover it secured. Use under 20%. Auto pay always. Ask questions. Anytime. Asterisk asterisk. He smiled. A little. And Daniela knew he would be okay. Because she had been. Eventually. That night, as she biked home under a sky smeared with stars and smog, Daniela whispered something to herself. I'm not just fixing credit. I'm building legacy. And she believed it. Because sometimes, the letter you never expected is the one that changes everything. Not because of the money, but because it reminds you were seen. The credit score was just a number. That's what they always said. Daniela had heard it in YouTube videos, read it in blog posts, even seen professors shrug when students whispered about their 500s like confession. It's just a number, they'd say. It doesn't define you. But in her experience, it did more than define you. It sorted you, classified you, decided what doors would open, what rent you'd pay, what car you could drive, if any. It decided whether the job you wanted saw you as trustworthy or the apartment complex labeled you high risk. And now it decided what her name looked like on a background check. Because Daniela had started applying for internships. And that's when things got complicated. Again, it started with an email from the sociology department. Summer research fellowships, now open, paid opportunities available. Her heart jumped. These were competitive spots, faculty-led research projects that not only paid, but came with stipends, mentorship, and sometimes even housing. For a student like Daniela, they were golden tickets. She scanned the listings. One in particular caught her eye. Title: Immigration and Identity, a longitudinal analysis of Lading's first-gen college experiences. Faculty lead, Dr. Amelia Nunez. Summer stipend, $3,500. Housing available? Yes. Requirements: GPA above 3.0, essay, background check. It felt like fate. She was a sociology student. Lading's first generation. She had lived the study. So she applied. Wrote the essay in a flurry of purpose and fire. Polished her resume until it gleamed. Got a glowing recommendation from Dr. Patel. And 3 weeks later, she got the call. You're shortlisted, Dr. Nunez said on speakerphone, warm and kind. We'd love to move forward. We just need to run the final checks. Daniela beamed. She made it. Until the email came. It was short, brutal. Dear Daniela, we regret to inform you that due to inconsistencies in your financial background screening, we are unable to proceed with your placement at this time. Her throat tightened. She read it again and again. Inconsistencies in your financial background screening. She immediately opened her credit report. It was the same. 601. Still not great. Still not bad. But buried on the third page, almost unnoticed, was a note. Collection: $113. Telecommunications company. Closed/transferred. Reported 2 years ago. Status: paid in full, asterisk asterisk. Her stomach dropped. She remembered it now. Barely. A T-Mobile bill from high school, when she'd been on a family plan. She had asked to cancel her line after graduation, before leaving for college. They said it was done, but her parents hadn't closed the entire account. And the $113 balance, her portion, had stayed hidden, unnoticed, until it hit collections. Rosa had paid it, eventually, but the damage was already logged, and it was hers, because the bill had been under her name. Her very first attempt at adulting, and it followed her like a ghost. She called the internship office, spoke to someone named Jared. I paid it, she explained. It was resolved. It's not even active anymore. I understand, Miss Ruiz, Jared replied, voice flat. But unfortunately, for placements that include housing and university travel, our policy requires no active collections and no history of major delinquencies in the last 24 months. She didn't yell, didn't argue. She just whispered, okay, and hung up. That night, she opened her notebook and wrote 3 words in bold. Names, numbers. Because that's what came down to. The name on the bill. The name on the report. The name that got attached to a 3-digit number. No context. No story. No caveats. Just judgment. But Daniela wasn't one to stay knocked down. Not anymore. Not after everything. She pulled up the website of all 3 credit bureaus and read about goodwill adjustment letters. These are notes you could write. Please, really, asking a creditor to remove a fully paid collection from your report. They didn't have to say yes, but sometimes they did. She crafted one carefully. Dear T-Mobile Collections Department, my name is Daniela Ruiz. I'm a 21-year-old first-generation college student who had a phone line under a family plan at age 18. Due to a miscommunication during the cancellation process, a balance of $113 remained on the account. This debt was never malicious, and it was paid in full once I became aware of it. I am working hard to build my credit and have since kept all other accounts in good standing. I respectfully request that you consider a goodwill deletion of this paid collection from my credit report. This one item is affecting my ability to qualify for academic programs that could significantly impact my future. I thank you for your time and for considering the human behind the number. Sincerely, Daniela Ruiz. She mailed it and waited. 2 weeks passed. No response. She tried not to think about it. Focused instead on her classes, her deliveries, her side tutoring sessions. She kept up her budget, continued paying her new, unsecured card in full, on time, every time. Her score climbed to 608, then 614. She felt it, momentum. Not enough to get the internship back, but maybe enough to avoid the next door slamming shut. Then, one Thursday morning, a letter arrived. Plain white envelope. Return address. T-Mobile Recovery Services. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single page. Dear Ms. Ruiz, thank you for your letter. After review, we have submitted a request to all 3 credit reporting bureaus to delete the paid collection account from your file. Please allow 30 to 45 days for the change to reflect. We wish you continued success. Daniela laughed. Laughed so hard it scared her roommate. Laughed until she cried. Because someone had said yes. Not because they had to, but because she'd asked. Because she told her story. Because she was seen. Again, that deletion added 27 points to her score. By October's end, she was at 641. Respectable. Respectable enough that she could apply for student bank accounts with perks. Respectable enough that she was finally invited to apply for credit cards, rather than chasing them. Respectable enough that she could walk into a rental office and not flinch when they asked to run her report. Respectable enough that she started to believe, truly believe, that the system no longer held her hostage. She'd studied it, challenged it, bent it, and she wasn't done. Later that semester, she spoke at a campus panel for first-gen students. The topic was unseen barriers. The microphone trembled slightly in her hand as she addressed the 40 faces staring back at her in the lecture hall. I used to think I was bad with money, she said. But I wasn't. I just didn't speak the language. She told them about the collection, the rejection, the goodwill letter, the spreadsheet, the scores, the scars. And when she finished, a girl in the front row raised her hand and asked, "How did you keep going?" Daniela paused, then answered, simply, "Because no one told me I could stop." After the talk, 5 students came up to her. 3 asked for budgeting advice. 2 hugged her. 1 cried. She gave out the link to her spreadsheet template, promised to email the goodwill letter draft. And for the first time, she felt something she hadn't dared feel since the rejection. Pride. Not for the credit score, not for the deletion, but for what she'd built. From nothing. And who she was becoming, letter by letter, point by point, story by story. The first $1,000 she ever saved was never supposed to happen. Not because she didn't try, not because she didn't budget, but because every time her balance approached triple digits, something crashed through it. A book fee, a bounce utility charge, a roommate who forgot their share of the internet bill. Daniela Ruiz had always lived in reaction mode, patching holes as fast as the system made them. So when the number $1,001.13 stared back at her from her bank app on a cold December morning, she didn't believe it. She refreshed the screen, then again, then laughed, quietly, into the sleeve of her hoodie. $1,000. Not borrowed, not deferred, not stolen back by surprise overdraft fees. Hers. It had started as a whisper in her mind, back when she moved into the apartment, after making that double deposit that nearly wiped her out. Back then, saving anything had felt impossible. She could barely cover the bills, let alone think of building an emergency fund. But during a late-night scroll through a budgeting thread on Reddit, she found a quote that struck her. Saving $1,000 isn't about security, it's about leverage. Leverage. That word stayed with her. At first, the goal was simple: stop being one broken laptop away from total collapse. But as the months went on, and she tracked every charge with monk-like precision, the goal grew teeth. She didn't just want to survive the next crisis. She wanted options. She opened a second account at her credit union. No debit card. No online shopping access. No auto-pay connections. She named it Freedom Fund in her spreadsheet. It started with $20, then $15 from tutoring, then $50 from a holiday food delivery bonus. Some weeks, all she could spare was $3.74, loose change left after groceries. But she logged every deposit like a sacred ritual. By October, the account sat at $424.96. By Thanksgiving, it hit $730, after she picked up extra hours during break while half the campus cleared out. And now, in December, just after finals, it had crossed the threshold. $1,001.13. She didn't tell anyone at first. Not because it wasn't a big deal, but because it was too big. It wasn't just a number. It was a shield. It meant she could say no to a shady landlord. It meant she could fix her bike without choosing between repairs or food. It meant she could take a breath, a real one. Inhale, exhale, without calculating how much it cost. That night, she printed a screenshot of the balance, taped it to the inside cover of her spiral notebook. Underneath, she wrote, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning." Then she made her new goal: save $2,000. Not just for emergencies, but for escape velocity. Because as her score grew, and it had, now sitting at 648, so did her sense of what was possible. Still, saving came with guilt. Every time she skipped a shift to study, she felt the weight of every dollar she didn't earn. When she spent $4.99 on a chai latte after acing her stats final, she mentally deducted it from next month's safety buffer. Survival had rewired her brain. Celebration felt reckless. Rest felt dangerous. But she was learning. That wealth, real wealth, wasn't about hoarding. It was about space, grace, and eventually, choice. So she allowed herself one splurge: a second-hand Kindle from OfferUp, $35, loaded with free PDFs from Project Gutenberg and library ebooks. Her reward for the $1,000 climb. Then, just before winter break, her roommate bailed. Unannounced. She came home one night, and the room was half empty, bed stripped, dresser drawers gaping like open mouths. No note, no text, just silence. And the rent, still due in 2 weeks. Daniela stared at the doorframe, at the absence, at the new panic crawling up her spine. But this time, she didn't spiral. She opened her spreadsheet, made a new tab: roommate bail plan. She cross-referenced her calendar with delivery shifts, rechecked her balance, moved $400 from her freedom fund, just enough to cover her share and the now missing portion. No overdraft, no landlord drama, no sleepless nights. She emailed her landlord and explained, then placed a new listing for a roommate. Within 10 days, the spot was filled. Her credit, untouched. Her mental health, bruised but intact. And her savings, down to $610, but alive. She journaled that night. This is what it's for. This is why I did all of it. Because when life pushed, it didn't fall. I pivoted. Because I had a cushion. I didn't have that last year. Now I do. And I will again. She set a new transfer for $25 a week. Non-negotiable. Her budget flexed around it like a muscle. One afternoon in January, she met up with her mom in Boyle Heights. Rosa looked older, tired. The work had aged her faster than it should have. They sat on a bench at Mariachi Plaza, sipping champorado and watching traffic crawl by. "You look good, Mija," Rosa said, rubbing her hands together for warmth. "Tired, but strong." "I saved $1,000, Daniela said softly. Her mom blinked. "In your account?" Daniela nodded. Her mom stared, eyes glassy. "No one in our family's ever done that." "I know," Daniela whispered. "I never could," Rosa said. "I know." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Rosa reached into her purse and pulled out a folded $20. "For your next 1,000, she said, pressing it into Daniela's palm. Daniela didn't refuse. She didn't protest. She just held it tightly and said, "Gracias, Mommy. I'll make it count." And she did. By mid-February, her fund was back at $950. Her score hit 657. Her rent was current. Her car balances, 0. And her mind, focused, not on what she lacked, but on what she was building. She wasn't rich, not by any stretch, but she was resourced. And that was new. The feeling of having something behind her. A parachute, a moat, a choice. $1,000 isn't wealth. But for Daniela Ruiz, it was power. Earned slowly, saved stubbornly, kept like a secret, and ready for whatever came next. By March, the campus had started to bloom again. Cherry blossoms near the library, wildflowers pushing through the cracks near the transit station, and that warm, buzzing hum of mid-semester motion. Students walked faster now, high on caffeine and looming deadlines. Professors started dropping hints about finals. And Daniela Ruiz? She walked with a different kind of urgency. Her credit score had hit 661. Not perfect, but official. It crossed an invisible threshold, just enough to qualify her for the next step in the ladder, a student auto loan pre-approval. And while she didn't have plans to buy a car yet, the idea that she could, That a lender might actually consider her name and not flinch, that was worth everything. For the first time in her life, the system wasn't rejecting her on sight. It was inviting her in. It started with a text from her bank. You may be eligible for a low-limit student auto loan. Tap here to check offers. No hard credit pull. Daniela hesitated. Offers like these usually meant strings, gotchas, disappointment. But curiosity won. She tapped. Up came a screen with her name, school email, and the words. Pre-qualified. Up to $7,500. Estimated APR. 8.2%. Term. 36 months. No cosigner required. Her throat went dry. She stared at the screen, trying to remember every decision, every ramen-fueled night that had led her here. From a 524 score and rejection letters to this. This wasn't just about buying a car. It was about being seen differently. Not as a burden, not as a risk, but as a contender. She didn't take the loan. Not yet. She wasn't ready. But she printed the offer and taped it inside her money manual notebook. It was proof that the grind had worked, that the world's algorithm had finally paused long enough to let her through. It made her think of her dad, how he used to fix up cars in their driveway with a borrowed socket set in his bare hands, turning broken into working just to get to his next job site. He never had a car loan, never had credit, paid in cash or not at all. She used to think that was strength. Now, she understood it was survival. And survival was powerful. But building something, that was a whole different kind of freedom. The same week the pre-approval came, so did something else. An email. Subject. Summer Fellowship. Reconsideration. She almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. But then she saw the name. Dr. Amelia Nunez. Her heart stuttered. She clicked. Daniela, I want to apologize again for how your application was handled last semester. The original decision was made quickly based on compliance guidelines that failed to take your full picture into account. I have since reviewed your file, including your progress and appeal documentation. If you are still available, I would like to offer you the position for the Summer Research Fellowship on Lading's first-gen identity. Daniela's eyes filled with tears before she even finished reading. She reread the line 5 times. I would like to offer you the position. It was real. They changed their mind. Not just because her score had improved, but because she had made herself unignorable. She called her mom first. Rosa answered on the first ring, breathless from folding laundry. Ma, Daniela said, voice shaking. Que paso, mija? I got it. The internship. The one that said no. They're letting me in. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then, gracias a Dios, her mother cried. Mira lo que hiciste. You did this. Daniela laughed through the tears. I know, because she had done it. Not overnight. Not by luck. By knowledge. By planning. By rewriting the rules. The internship came with housing. Not a luxury dorm, but a shared apartment near the research center with free utilities and access to campus food stipends. That meant she wouldn't need to scramble for rent during the summer. That meant she could pause her delivery gigs for a few weeks. That meant, for the first time, she could focus entirely on the work. Researching identity, gathering narratives, writing reports, using her voice and her data to change the way systems see people like her. It was full circle. She'd gone from analyzing her own financial trauma to studying the trauma of others, armed with lived experience and now leverage. Her first meeting with Dr. Nunez was in a sunlit office filled with succulents and worn textbooks. I read your original essay again, the professor said, leaning forward. It was one of the most raw, articulate pieces I've seen in years. Daniela flushed. I was desperate when I wrote it, she admitted. Dr. Nunez smiled. Sometimes desperation sharpens the truth. They talked for over an hour about systems, statistics, sociology, and strategy. When she left, Daniela felt taller, more anchored, more fluent in the language of legitimacy. She didn't just belong here. She was contributing. Later that evening, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at her financial dashboard. Credit score, 665. Emergency fund, $1,204.76. Credit utilization, 11%. She exhaled, slow and long, then closed the laptop. Sometimes the best metric wasn't on the screen. It was how calm she felt while looking at it. She picked up her notebook, flipped to the back, and began a new section. What I wish I'd known at 18. She started listing things, simple truths. You don't need a cosigner to build credit. You need consistency. The system isn't designed to explain itself. Learn its language. A low score is not a character flaw. Every point you earn is a story. Emergency funds aren't just for emergencies. They're for dignity. Your first no doesn't mean your last. By midnight, she had a full page. And an idea. What if she shared this? What if she made it public? What if everything she'd learned, through trial and trauma, could help someone else avoid the same cliffs? She opened a blank document on her laptop and typed the title. The Credit Survival Guide, a first-gen story. She didn't know if it would be a blog post, a pamphlet, a zine, or a series of TikToks. But she knew this. Her story didn't end with getting in. It started with giving back. That night, as she lay in bed, her phone buzzed with a notification from her banking app. Recurring transfer complete. $25, Freedom Fund. She smiled. That was the real victory. Not the internship, not the score, not the grant, but the ritual, the habit, the proof that she had become someone she never thought she could be. Financially prepared, emotionally grounded, and free. Because for Daniela Ruiz, freedom didn't come in big moments. It came in small, deliberate acts. Paying on time, asking the hard questions, writing the letter anyway, saying no when it cost her something, saying yes when it meant choosing herself. And now, as she stood on the edge of the next chapter, she understood something deeper than any credit lesson. Stability is not a finish line. It's a foundation, and she had built it, brick by brick, point by point, against the odds, and still rising. By April, the walls of the campus began to echo with the end-of-semester panic. Group projects hastily assembled in hallways, late-night cramming in the library's quiet corners, the smell of microwaved instant noodles mixing with ambition and burnout. Daniela Ruiz was no stranger to this energy. But this year, something was different. She wasn't just surviving finals. She wasn't just clawing her way through another season of academic pressure and financial scarcity. She was holding her own, balanced, prepared, focused. And now, for the first time, she was invited to the other side. It came as an email from the Campus Financial Equity Initiative. The subject line read, Invitation, Student Advisory Panel on Access and Affordability. At first, she thought it was a mass message, one of those student-wide, we value your opinion surveys that went nowhere. But this one was different. Personalized. Direct. It began, Daniela, we've reviewed your recent application for our Summer Equity Fellowship. While that decision is still in process, your story and your documented advocacy for first-generation students stood out to our review board. We would like to formally invite you to join the inaugural Student Advisory Panel on Access and Affordability. This panel will work alongside campus administrators and financial aid representatives to review and improve institutional barriers to financial support. You will have a vote, a voice, a seat at the table. Daniela sat in stunned silence. A vote, a voice, a seat. It was the kind of language usually reserved for people in suits. People with titles. Not girls with prepaid bus passes and budgets built in Google Sheets. She reread the message 3 times. It wasn't just symbolic. The advisory panel would meet monthly. Members would be compensated. Feedback would go directly into policy design for the next academic year. She clicked accept before she could second-guess herself. Then opened her notebook and wrote a new phrase at the top of a blank page. From system survivor to system designer. Because for years, she had been trying to squeeze through cracks in the wall. Now, she had a chisel. The first panel meeting was held in the Chancellor's conference room. Daniela arrived early, wore her best jeans, a borrowed blazer from her roommate, and the same worn university hoodie underneath, because some things were still part of her armor. The room smelled like citrus polish and old wood. Long glass table, leather chairs, notebooks pre-placed at each seat. She recognized a few of the other students, student government reps, a few seniors who ran diversity clubs, one business major who looked like he already had a LinkedIn following. She took her seat near the end of the table and placed her spiral-bound notebook in front of her. Its corners were bent. Its cover was cracked, but it held more knowledge than any textbook she'd ever been assigned. And today it would speak. The meeting began with introductions. Each student shared their background, what brought them to the panel. When it was Daniela's turn, she stood. Hi, I'm Daniela Ruiz. I'm a third-year sociology student. First gen. I work part-time. I manage my finances through spreadsheets. And I'm here because I don't think a 524 credit score should disqualify you from stable housing, food, or academic opportunity. The room went quiet. Then someone clapped. Then a few more. Not out of politeness, but respect. She sat down, breathless. And the meeting moved forward. They discussed pain points. What processes created the most difficulty for students navigating finances? Some brought up delayed disbursements. Others cited confusing FAFSA forms or inconsistent advisor support. Daniela waited her turn, then raised her hand. "Can I ask something?" she said. Everyone turned. "What if we stopped treating financial aid as a transaction," she said slowly, "and started treating it as academic infrastructure, like a classroom or a syllabus, something we build with students, not around them?" Silence. Then the administrator leading the session nodded. "I've never heard it framed that way," she said. "But you're right." Daniela didn't smile. She just underlined a sentence in her notebook. "Define the system before it defines you." After the meeting, the deputy director of student affairs approached her in the hallway. "Ruiz," she said, "you ever consider policy work after graduation?" Daniela blinked. "I always thought I'd go into nonprofit work," she said. "Or research." "Well," the woman said, "you've got an eye for systems. And a lived experience that people need to hear. Keep going." It wasn't a job offer, but it was a nudge. And sometimes those matter more. That weekend, she started a Google Doc, titled it, "If I Design Financial Aid," and inside, she poured every broken experience, every clunky form, every late disbursement, and missing explanation and denied loan. Then next to each, she wrote a fix, a financial literacy orientation for all first-gen students. Preset budgeting templates integrated with the student portal. Emergency aid accessible via same-day request. Rent reporting partnerships with local landlords. A financial coach directory, separate from academic advising. She shared it with her sociology professor. He forwarded it to the dean. And by May, the document had reached the chancellor's office. No guarantees, no promises, but people were reading it. And that alone felt like revolution. Meanwhile, her credit score hit 671, the highest it had ever been. She hardly celebrated, not because it didn't matter, but because it wasn't the end anymore. She was aiming higher now. Her goal, 700 by graduation, not just for the number, but for what it meant. Autonomy, credibility, and the power to choose. One evening, she got a message from one of the students she'd mentored during the fall. It was a screenshot of a credit score, 624. The message said, "Started with 480. Used your spreadsheet. Thank you for everything." Daniela stared at the screen and smiled. Then typed back, "You did the work. I just showed you where to look." That night, she added something new to her money manual notebook. A single sentence. "Your healing teaches others how to begin." And below that, "Keep teaching." Because Daniela Ruiz wasn't just fixing her finances anymore. She was fixing the way systems see people like her. She was bringing numbers back into the light, giving them names, giving them context, giving them dignity. And she wasn't waiting for permission to do it. She had earned her seat, and she was just getting started. By mid-May, everything should have felt perfect. Daniela Ruiz had a seat at the table. Her score hovered in the high 670s, sometimes flickering at 678, just 2 points shy of her long-term goal. She had an emergency fund that stayed steady. Even after a flat tire and a friend's birthday dinner, she didn't have the heart to skip. She was balancing classes, mentoring, and her upcoming fellowship with the kind of calm that once felt unthinkable. And yet, something was off. For weeks, the number didn't budge. 678. Again, and again, and again. She paid her balances in full, kept her utilization under 10%, auto-paid every account early. She did everything right, and the number sat there, unmoving, stubborn, silent. At first, she tried to ignore it. After all, she'd come so far. From a 524 score and denial letters to this, credit card approvals, housing stability, respect. Why care about 2 points? But that's the thing about numbers. They can start to define your progress, even when they're not supposed to. And 2 points began to feel like a wall she couldn't see, but could feel pressing against her every time she checked her score. She Googled everything. Why won't my credit score go up? Stuck at 678 for weeks. Score plateau, even with perfect habits. The answers were frustrating. Time heals most wounds. Keep doing what you're doing. Credit scores grow slow after 650. She knew all that. She taught all that. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two different battles. Every time she opened the app and saw 678, her chest tightened. Because she didn't want to wait. She'd waited her whole life. For approval. For eligibility. For access. Now that she was on the cusp, she wanted in. It wasn't just impatience. It was what 700 represented. The score wasn't the prize. It was the proof that she was no longer a risk, that the system she'd studied and survived finally saw her as worthy, that if she applied for a better apartment or a grad school loan, or someday even a mortgage, she wouldn't need to apologize first. 2 points. She'd faced bigger battles, but this one felt like a personal dare. She called her credit union to ask if anything was dragging her down. The representative was kind, walked her through her profile. "Everything looks good," the woman said. "Honestly, you're doing everything right. Sometimes the models just pause. They like to see consistency." Daniela laughed bitterly. "I've been consistent." "I know," the rep said. "And that's why your next jump will be real. Just give it time. Give it time." Daniela had been giving the system time for 21 years, waiting for the world to notice her. Now she was ready to move, and the number wouldn't. She tried everything. Tried removing herself as an authorized user on a friend's older account that she thought might be dragging her age average down. Nothing. Tried requesting a credit line increase on her secured card. Denied. Insufficient deposit history. She considered opening a third account to diversify her mix. But the advice was mixed. One hard inquiry might drop her a few points before recovery. So she waited, and waited, and nothing changed. And slowly, the thoughts began to creep in. What if this is it? What if I've hit the ceiling for someone like me? What if the rules keep shifting because I'm not meant to win? She didn't want to believe it. But those thoughts were loud. Louder than the facts. Louder than the spreadsheets. Louder than reason. Until one morning, while waiting for her bus, she opened her budgeting app, not the Score app, and saw something she'd written 3 months ago. "You're not building a number. You're building a life." She froze. That line, it hit harder now, because she realized she had built a life. One that didn't break when her roommate disappeared. One that kept food in the fridge and books on the table. One that let her say no to extra shifts when she needed to study. One that gave her the courage to sit in rooms with people who designed the very system she used to curse. She was living the credit she had built, whether the number moved or not. So she changed the goal. Not the long-term one. She still wanted that 700. But the next goal. She pulled out her notebook and drew a new heading. Impact score. And underneath that, a different kind of metric. Students mentored. 7. Emergency fund stability. 5 months. Advocacy meetings led. 3. Meals missed. 0. Bills paid late. 0 since September. Number of times I panicked checking my balance. 0. For the first time. She smiled. And that smile felt more important than a number. She still tracked her credit. Still budgeted. Still watched the system like a scientist. But she also started giving talks on campus. Small workshops hosted in the library. Under soft fluorescence and nervous freshman energy. She called them "What Credit Can't Measure." And people showed up. Not just students in crisis, but students in confusion. People who didn't understand what an authorized user was, or how rent could report to Experian, or why a score would drop even after paying off debt. And she told them everything. All of it. Including the part about getting stuck at 678. And how that didn't make her a failure. It made her human. One night after a workshop, a student approached her, quiet, nervous, biting her thumbnail. "I have a 508, she whispered. "I'm so embarrassed." Daniela shook her head. "No shame," she said. "That's just a snapshot, not a sentence." The girl nodded, eyes wet. "I haven't told anyone," she whispered. "Not even my parents." Daniela reached in her bag and pulled out a printed card. Her template. The credit starter plan. Budget tab. Card suggestions. YouTube video links. Letter templates. All the things she wished someone had handed her at 18. The girl clutched it like medicine. And Daniela walked home that night knowing the number might not move. But she had. And so had the world around her. By the end of May, her score ticked up 1 point. 679. She didn't scream, didn't throw confetti. She smiled, then turned off her phone, because she had a panel meeting the next day, and a spreadsheet to update, and a new mentee starting next week. The number would rise, or it wouldn't. Either way, she was already free. It came disguised as a gift, a cousin's quinceanera. The whole family was going, Rosa, the aunts, the cousins for both sides. It was going to be big. One of those all-night East LA affairs with mariachi at dusk, reggaeton at midnight, and enough tamales to fill a moving van. There would be a DJ, a dessert wall, custom centerpieces. Daniela's mom had been talking about it for weeks. She's your only little cousin, Rosa said one night over the phone. You have to come, Ija. Daniela sat on the edge of her mattress, biting the corner of her lip. She hadn't been home in months. Not really. Not since she left for school at 18. And she missed them. She missed her. The cousin turning 15 had once followed her around in oversized rain boots, mimicking everything Daniela said like a tiny echo. But the party was in 2 weeks, and Daniela had $137.94 in discretionary funds for the month. That was it. And when she did the math, gas money for a friend's car, a gift, a dress, even something simple, it would wipe her out. In another life, she wouldn't have thought twice. She would have gone, even if it meant overdrafting her account, even if it meant maxing her card and dealing with the consequences later. Because family mattered, because showing up mattered, because the idea of saying no to something joyful, to something expected, felt like betrayal. But this was a different Daniela now, one who had built her life, inch by inch, from the pieces of financial chaos. One who had sat in enough cold campus rooms with her own tears in her throat to know that short-term emotion had long-term costs. Still, the guilt weighed on her like a second spine. She called her mom the next morning. Ma, I've been running the numbers, she said. Rosa was humming in the background, probably folding towels, always doing 3 things at once. And, her mother asked, I don't think I can come, Daniela said softly. Not this time. Silence. A pause. Then, is it school? Finals. Daniela hesitated, then told the truth. No, it's the budget. More silence. I've got $137 this month for non-essentials. And this trip would clean me out. I can't lose momentum, Ma. I'm so close. My score's at 679. I've got less than $100 left on my secured card. I'm trying to keep my utilization under 10%. Her voice broke a little. I just can't risk it. Not now. Rosa didn't answer right away. Daniela braced for the guilt, for the sigh, for the but Mija, it's only money. But instead, Rosa said, I'm proud of you. Daniela blinked. What? I'm proud of you, Rosa repeated. You've learned how to protect what you're building. That's more important than cake and music. We'll send you pictures. Daniela closed her eyes. Relief flooded her chest. Then guilt crept in behind it. I feel like a bad cousin, she whispered. No. Her mother said firmly, You're just a woman who's learning to say no. That's brave. That night, Daniela sat at her desk and opened her notebook. At the top of a fresh page, she wrote, The first time I said no to something good. She made a list of everything the old version of herself would have sacrificed. She would have gone, would have borrowed gas money, would have skipped groceries next week, would have maxed the card, would have cried in secret when the balance came due. And no one would have known. Least of all the cousin in a pink dress twirling under a disco ball. But now, she was honoring a different kind of commitment. To herself. Instead of going to the party, she spent a weekend organizing a community credit workshop at the Student Resource Center. It wasn't flashy. Just 8 students in a classroom with fluorescent lights and old chairs that squeaked every time someone shifted. She brought printouts of credit-building tips, sample budget templates, and a slide deck titled, Credit as Consent, How to Opt into Power. Halfway through, one student raised their hand and said, But why does it feel like we're always playing catch-up? Daniela looked at them and nodded. Because we are, she said. The system wasn't built for us. But the trick is, we learn it anyway. And then we use it to carve our own space. Afterward, 2 students stayed behind to talk. One asked if he should open a second credit card. Another wanted help writing a goodwill letter. Daniela gave them answers. Shared her email. Walked home tired, but fulfilled, and never once checked her balance in fear. That Sunday, a text buzzed on her phone. A photo. Her cousin in a sparkling gown, arms raised, eyes shining beneath a chandelier made of rented glass. Daniela smiled. Type back. You look like a queen. I'm so proud of you. I'll visit soon, when I can do it right. The response came minutes later. Te quiero, Danny. She put the phone down and whispered to herself. Saying no doesn't mean saying never. It means saying not yet. And then she added to her notebook. Financial boundaries are still love. By the end of the month, her score nudged up again. 681. 2 points. The one she'd been waiting for. Not because she skipped the party, but because she stayed the course. And maybe that was the lesson. That saying no to something beautiful doesn't make you less worthy of joy. It makes you ready for the day when the joy comes without a cost. For Daniela, the hardest part of financial growth wasn't numbers. It was guilt. Cultural guilt. Family guilt. Survivor guilt. The guilt of having just enough to say not today, when everyone else is still living week to week, saying yes through clenched teeth and silent dread. But the guilt was less now. Not gone, but smaller. Manageable. Like her spending habits. Like her balances. Like her future. She added one last note to her April page. I said no. And nothing fell apart. Not me. Not the people I love. I'm still here. And I'm still enough. There was something sacred about the community center on Whittier Boulevard. Daniela hadn't been there since she was 16, back when her mom used to drag her to free tax clinics and housing assistance seminars on Saturdays. Back then, the folding chairs made her legs itch, the air smelled like copier toner and tamales, and all she wanted was to be anywhere else. Now, at 21, she stood at the front of that same room, and people were waiting for her. She gripped her notebook tightly. Outside, the summer sun baked the cracked sidewalk and the faded mural of laborers and mariachis. Inside, it was cooler, quieter, but buzzing with something deeper than heat. Curiosity, hope, and maybe, for some of them, desperation. Because today wasn't just any session. It was her first full credit literacy workshop. Not on campus, not in theory, but in the real world, among neighbors who reminded her of home. The flyer had gone up a week earlier. Building credit from zero. A free workshop for first-timers, cash-only workers, and anyone who's been told no. Facilitator, Daniela Ruiz, student advocate and credit coach. She'd barely gotten the courage to call herself that. Credit coach. It felt too formal, too adult to not her. But it was true. She wasn't a banker. Wasn't a CPA. Wasn't a YouTuber. She was a survivor of the system, fluent in its quiet codes. And now, she was here to translate. 10 minutes before start time, the chairs were half full. Mothers with notebooks. Men in work boots. A teenager with a notepad labeled Dad's Credit Questions. An abuela with a flip phone. 2 women who looked fresh from a shift, still in aprons, exhaustion clinging to their brows. Daniela swallowed hard. She was used to classrooms. Whiteboards. Cafes with lattes and laptops. But this room? This was different. These were her people. And she didn't want to get it wrong. She began the only way she knew how, with her story. 3 years ago, she said, her voice soft but steady, I had a credit score of 524. I didn't even know what that meant. All I knew was that I couldn't rent an apartment, couldn't get a loan, couldn't even buy textbooks without crossing my fingers at checkout. A few people nodded. Everything I had was in someone else's name. My mom's, a roommate's, a prepaid account. And when something broke, I broke with it. She paused. But today, my score is 681. I have my own apartment, 2 credit cards, an emergency fund, and most importantly, control. She looked out across the room, and I didn't get that from luck. I got that from learning. And I'm here to teach you exactly how. She launched into the basics. What credit score was. How it was calculated. The difference between hard and soft inquiries. How to open a secured credit card, even if you've been denied before. Why a $200 limit, used wisely, could be the first brick in a financial fortress. She broke it down like a recipe. No jargon, no condescension, just truth. She held up her phone and showed her actual balance, her credit card app, her tracked usage. She passed around her laminated cheat sheet. The 5 things to start with $0 and no cosigner. Secured card, no fee, reports to all 3 bureaus. Rent reporting through platforms that partner with landlords. Utility bill reporting. Credit builder loans from community credit unions. On-time payments. Every time, even if it's just the minimum. A man in the back raised his hand. What if I'm undocumented? She nodded. She'd expected that question. There are still paths, she said. Some credit unions let you open secured accounts with ITINs instead of SSNs. You can build your history even without a social. And once you get legal status, your history goes with you. Another woman raised her hand. I messed up a few years ago. Cell phone bill. Collections. Paid it, but it's still there. I feel stuck. Daniela stepped closer. I had the same thing, and I wrote a goodwill letter. Asked them to remove it. And you know what? They did. Her voice grew stronger. Nothing is permanent. That's what the credit industry doesn't want you to know. The room leaned in now. They weren't just listening. They were processing. Rewriting years of shame. Of being told you don't qualify. Of believing they were failures, not simply excluded. Daniela passed around pens and paper. Invited them to write down their first memory of money. The first time they felt judged by a number. The first thing they do if they had an 800 score tomorrow. The answers came in softly, then louder. Buy my own car. Get a new fridge. Co-sign for my kids' FAFSA. Apply for an apartment without begging. Stop feeling afraid. Daniela blinked back tears. This wasn't about numbers. It never had been. It was about power. After the session, people stayed. One woman hugged her. A teen boy asked if she'd tutor his older brother. A grandmother handed her a tamal in foil and whispered, "For your stomach, Mija, you got fire in you." And then came the most unexpected moment of all. A man in his 60s, quiet, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, approached her with a stack of papers. I think I messed up," he said in a low voice. "Opened cards in '98. Got laid off in 2009. Never looked again. But I want to fix it. For my son." Daniela took the papers. Old statements. Collection notices. A printed-out Equifax report from a library computer. She looked at him and said, "We'll start here. One step at a time." And for the first time, he smiled. Later that night, back in her apartment, she opened her laptop. Her inbox was full. Requests. Questions. Thank you notes. She created a new folder called Whittier Workshop and added a spreadsheet. Name, contact, credit score, goal, action plan. Because they were trusting her now, and she wouldn't let them down. She checked her own score. Have it by now. Still 681. She smiled, then closed the app, because something more important had moved. Her impact, her reach, her understanding that what she'd built, what she once believed was just for her survival, was now a toolkit for others. And that made every number worth it. She added one last note to her notebook that night. The goal was never 700. The goal was freedom. And freedom shared is how we all rise. Daniela Ruiz hadn't opened the email yet. She stared at the subject line for 5 full minutes, her thumb hovering over the screen, heart pounding like it used to before FAFSA deadlines and final exams. Subject: Fall Admission Update, Columbia University Graduate Sociology Department. It had come at 6:12 p.m., tucked between a tutoring reminder and a receipt from her prepaid electric bill. No bold font, no fireworks, just text. Still, it might as well have lit up the room. She knew what it meant. An answer. And maybe, finally, a door. She'd applied months ago. Quietly. Carefully. Secretly. She hadn't told her mom. Not yet. Not when it still felt impossible. Not when the words "I'm applying to Columbia" sounded more like fiction than fact. She had started the process on a whim. Just see what happens moment after a professor pulled her aside after class. "You've got a researcher's mind," he'd said, "and a fire that institutions need." She'd laughed. "I have a 681 credit score and a job delivering burritos on weekends." He had smiled. "Even better. You understand reality." The application had cost $85. She had saved for it, line by line. Not just for Columbia, but for 3 other schools too. She wrote the essays in the library after her shifts, using noise-canceling headphones and sticky notes as bookmarks. She cried once in the middle of the statement of purpose. Not because she was sad, but because, for the first time, she was writing about the future as if it was allowed. She'd written, "I want to build systems I didn't grow up inside. I want to turn my mother's cash jobs and my credit confusion into research that rewrites policies. I want to help undocumented, underbanked, underestimated people step into financial power, not with fear, but fluency. She meant every word. And now, the response was waiting. She finally tapped the email, held her breath, and read, "Dear Daniela, we are thrilled to offer you admission to the Columbia University Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, Department of Sociology. Your application stood out for its clarity, authenticity, and powerful academic vision. We believe your work will add vital perspective to our program. Congratulations." Daniela gasped. Not cried. Gasped. Like all the oxygen in the room disappeared and returned at once. She covered her mouth, then laughed, short and wild, like the sound of someone unchained. Columbia. She had gotten into Columbia. But as quickly as the joy surged, so did the next thought. Can I afford it? Because dreams in Daniela's world always had a price tag. The tuition alone was staggering. Living in New York? Nearly double her current cost of living. She wasn't afraid of work. She'd never been. But this wasn't about just working hard. It was about leverage. And that's when she knew. This wasn't a dream anymore. It was a financial plan. She opened a new tab in her spreadsheet labeled, Columbia Budget. Go or grow. In it, she broke down. Tuition, with aid $34,000. Housing, shared $1,200 per month. Transit, $120 per month. Books plus fees, $1,000/year. Emergency buffer, at least $2,000. Total year, one projection, $52,400. She had some aid, not a full ride. Enough to make it possible, but not painless. The rest? That would come down to savings, scholarships, and loans. Grad Plus loans. Credit-based loans. And this was the moment all her work would be tested. Because Grad Plus loans required a clean credit history. No delinquencies. No collections. No default. And a minimum FICO score in the mid-600s. Daniela logged in. Checked her credit. Score, 684. No negatives. No late payments. No collection notices. All green lights. She exhaled. For the first time in her life, a financial door wasn't just open. It was already unlocked. She applied. Held her breath again. 2 days later, the loan was approved. She read the confirmation out loud, sitting at her desk under the light of a string of LED bulbs. Her spiral notebook open beside her. Approved. $18,500 Grad Plus loan. Columbia GSAS. Fall 2025. She ran her hands over the paper, over her keyboard, over the worn edge of her desk. Everything she had worked for, the sleepless nights, the ramen dinners, the utility payment schedules, had built to this moment. Not wealth, but access. And not by accident, by design. Still, she wasn't done. She wanted more than debt and dreams. She wanted backup. So she applied to fellowships, to housing subsidies for low-income grad students, to part-time researcher roles. She cold emailed 3 sociology departments asking if they needed summer assistance. One replied, "Your resume is impressive. Let's talk." Every yes that came now was because of the no's she'd once dared to say. She finally told her mom one evening on a long walk through Boyle Heights. "Columbia." Rosa repeated, eyes wide. "That's like the movies, right?" Daniela laughed. "It's real. I got in. I'm going." Rosa blinked away tears. "And you can afford it." "I've got it covered," Daniela said. She didn't mention the loan, or the spreadsheet, or the 20 hours of research it took to line it all up. What mattered was that it was true. Later that week, her final Columbia cost sheet came in. With all aid and offers, she'd only need to borrow $24,300 total. Still a lot, but manageable. Compared to the average grad student debt, it was a victory. And most importantly, her credit score made it possible. She updated her notebook. May 2025, admitted to Columbia. 684 credit score equals loan approval. Credit equals choice. Choice equals power. Power equals purpose. And she added one more line beneath it. Everything I once feared is now a tool. The night before she accepted her offer, she made a list of what she'd take to New York. It was short. Her notebook, her budget, her mom's necklace, her laptop, a wall print that read, "Never begged to belong," and her belief that this wasn't a Cinderella story. It was a strategy, years in the making, and just beginning. Daniela had always thought her mother was invincible. Rosa Ruiz could clean 5 houses in a day, cook 3 meals out of nothing, and stretch a $20 bill until it gave up and apologized. She raised a daughter alone, across languages, borders, and bank account minimums. Daniela had seen her mother navigate eviction threats, dental infections, and school fees without flinching. But the day she found her mom sitting at the kitchen table, staring helplessly at a denial letter from a credit card application, shaking, Daniela realized something terrifying. Even warriors need a guide. It started with a phone call. "Danny," Rosa said one night, her voice small. "I tried to apply for a credit card. They said no. I don't understand why." Daniela sat up straighter. "You never had one?" "No. I always used debit. Or cash." Daniela's stomach turned. That meant her mother had no credit file. Or worse, one that was incomplete, scattered, misreported. Did they give a reason? They said insufficient credit history, and something about no file on Experian. I don't know what that means. Daniela had heard those words before. She used to live them, but it felt different now. Seeing them hit her mother, this strong, brilliant woman who had done everything right by feel, by instinct, by survival. She whispered into the phone, "It's not your fault." That weekend, Daniela took the train back to Boyle Heights. She hadn't meant to visit so soon. She was knee-deep in Columbia prep, apartment searches, farewell coffee dates. But some things overrode the calendar. She walked into their small apartment with her laptop, a fresh spiral notebook, and the same energy she once brought into lectures and workshops. Only this time, the student was her mother. Rosa greeted her with a worried smile. "I don't want to make you do work, Mija." Daniela hugged her. "This is not work. This is ours." They sat at the same worn kitchen table where Daniela had once done algebra homework in 8th grade, while her mom balanced a checkbook by candlelight. Now, they were opening Credit Karma together. Daniela created a login for her mom, inputting her information slowly, carefully. Rosa peered over her shoulder, squinting, biting her lip every time Daniela paused to explain something. When the results loaded, the screen was almost empty. No score, no open accounts, no history, just a name. Unseen, unranked, unscored. "It says I don't exist." Rosa asked quietly. "No, Ma," Daniela said gently. "It says the system doesn't know you. But I pay my rent. I pay my bills. On time." "I know, but they weren't reporting it." Her mother shook her head. "How is that fair?" "It's not," Daniela said. "But now we fix it." She pulled out the notebook, wrote her mother's name at the top in big block letters, then made 3 columns. What we have, what we need, what we'll build. Under what we have, she listed, rent paid in full for 11 years. Utility bills in Rosa's name. A steady paycheck, under the table but consistent. An item. $480 in savings. No debt. Under what we need. A reporting account. A credit builder loan. A secured card. A trade line reporting rent. An emergency plan. And under what we'll build. A credit score. Access to better housing. Lower interest options. Dignity in paperwork. Proof of her legacy. "Okay," Daniela said. Step 1, rent reporting. They signed up with a third-party platform that worked with independent landlords. Daniela typed up a letter for their building manager, explaining what it was and how easy it would be. Step 2, secured credit card. They applied with a credit union offering item-based options. Daniela fronted the $200 deposit from her own emergency fund. Step 3, utility verification. Daniela helped upload the past 12 months of gas, electric, and water bills. The system would backdate them into her mom's file as alternative credit data. Rosa watched, stunned. "So all this time, I could have had a score?" "Yes. You just weren't told how." Her mother leaned back, overwhelmed. "They should teach this in school." "They should," Daniela said. "That's why I'm going to Columbia." Over the next month, they tracked everything together. Rosa learned how to check her account online, how to set auto pay for a card, how to keep usage under 10%, how to check the statement date instead of the due date to optimize her report. She carried a Post-it in her purse with the phrase, "Pay before statement closes." She called it her power note. Daniela laughed every time she saw her pull it out at the grocery store. Then came the email. Subject: "Your credit score is ready." Rosa was too nervous to open it. Daniela sat beside her, hand over her mom's as they tapped it together. Score: 631. Rosa gasped. "I have a number," she whispered. Daniela grinned. "You always did. It just wasn't visible before." They printed the screen, taped it to the fridge. Underneath, Daniela wrote, "This is what legacy looks like." That weekend, Rosa applied for a small furniture financing plan at a local store. Approved in minutes. No cosigner. No pleading. Just a number. And behind that, a woman who had always been trustworthy, now finally seen that way on paper. Later, as they sat on the porch watching neighbors walk their dogs and kids play on a cracked sidewalk, Rosa turned to Daniela. "I used to feel ashamed," she said softly, "that I couldn't teach you these things, that you had to figure it out alone." Daniela shook her head. "You didn't fail me, Ma. You taught me how to fight. I just translated it into numbers." Her mother smiled. "And now I have numbers too." "Yeah," Daniela said. "And now, we build the next thing." That night, back in her apartment, Daniela opened her own notebook. Wrote, "Taught my mother credit. She taught me how to endure. Now we both know how to build." And she added something beneath it. "Freedom isn't individual. It's inherited. Or it should be. I'm making sure it is." The next workshop she planned was called Credit for Caregivers, Building Financial Identity for the Ones Who Raised Us. Because Rosa wasn't alone. She was one of millions. And now, Daniela had the blueprint. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and pine cleaner. Sunlight spilled in through wide windows, catching dust motes midair. The hardwood floors glowed faintly with that new polished shine. It was tiny, no doubt, maybe 400 square feet total. A studio, but the kind of studio with its own bathroom. A kitchen with more than one cabinet. No roommate. No curfews. No lease with someone else's name at the top. Just hers. Daniela Ruiz. For the first time in her life. It was July now. She had exactly 6 weeks before she moved to New York. Columbia's acceptance was real. The loan had been approved. Her budget plan was airtight. Every dollar accounted for, from the subway card to textbook fees. But first, she needed a place to live. That meant applying for an apartment in one of the most expensive cities in the world with no cosigner, no full-time job, and no safety net. Just a 684 credit score, and a track record of doing the impossible. She started the search cautiously. Studio apartments near campus were out of the question. $2, 800 plus for a shoebox. So she widened the net. Washington Heights, Hamilton Terrace, Northern Harlem. Still steep, but not unreachable. She tracked listings in a spreadsheet labeled NYC Housing Options, Viable/Stretch/Scam. She'd learned to spot fake listings fast. No application fee transparency, cash-only deposits, weird grammar. She'd even made a checklist. Management reviews exist. Walk-up or elevator. Utilities included. 40x rent rule waived with student status. Accept Grad Plus loans as income proof. Most listings laughed her off. Need a cosigner with 700 plus credit. No students unless 3 years job history. Monthly income must be $7,000 plus. She closed tabs. Kept looking. Refused to panic. Then, on a Tuesday morning, she found it. Cozy Harlem Studio, $1,850 per month. Students welcome. No cosigner needed. She thought it was a trap, but the listing linked to a verified management site. The photos were real. The reviews were decent. She emailed. Within hours, she got a reply. "Hi Daniela. We rent frequently to Columbia grad students. If you have proof of loan disbursement, credit score above 670, and 1.5x rent in savings, we're happy to process your application. No cosigner needed. First come, first serve." She stared at the message, then pulled up her documents. She had it all. Loan proof. Emergency savings. A 684 score. 2 years of perfect payment history. Her hands trembled as she clicked reply. The video tour was scheduled for the next day. The unit was small but clean. White walls. A window view of trees. A worn, creaky radiator that felt honest. Somehow, she could see herself there. Early mornings with tea, textbooks open on the counter, writing grant applications at a folding table. She applied the same day. Paid the $45 application fee. Held her breath. 3 days later, she got the call. "Daniela? Hi. This is Nadine from Harlem Property Group. Your application's been approved." Daniela sat down. Literally sat, hard, into her desk chair. Approved. No cosigner. No backup. Just her. Nadine continued. "We'll be sending the lease digitally. You'll need to pay first and last month's rent. $3, $700 total, plus a $500 deposit. Daniela nodded, even though no one could see her. I'll send the wire today. She opened her budgeting spreadsheet. Her freedom fund sat at $4,310.87. It would drop her balance below $200. But she'd accounted for that. Her grad plus loan disbursement would arrive 3 weeks later, enough to refill the tank and float the first semester. And now she would have her own address in New York City, on her own terms. She completed the lease digitally, typed her name into every field with slow, reverent precision. At the final line, signature, Daniela Ruiz, she paused. This wasn't just a rental contract. It was proof that she had built a life sturdy enough to be trusted, that her name meant something on paper now, that she no longer needed to beg, borrow, or explain away her existence. She clicked submit and whispered, I live here now. She called her mom. Rosa cried. I used to dream about this, she said. A place with your name on the lease. Not mine. Not someone else's. Yours. Daniela smiled, eyes full. I earned this, right? You did more than earn it, Rosa said. You changed our name. You made it mean something new. That night, she lay in bed and let herself imagine it. Not the stress. Not the bills. The life. Waking up in New York. Walking to campus with her backpack, her research folder, her worn-out sneakers still carrying her forward. Cooking in her tiny kitchen. Listening to city noise instead of sirens. Reading sociology theory late into the night. Feet propped up on a milk crate table. She saw it, and it was hers. Not gifted. Not borrowed. Built. The next day, she posted a photo on her private Instagram. Just her hand, holding the signed lease. Caption. No cosigner. No backup. Just 684 points. And 5 years of unrelenting belief. NYC, I'm coming home. That post was shared 19 times. She got messages from girls she hadn't spoken to since high school. How did you do it? Can I call you for help? My sister's trying to rent in Boston. Can you show her your doc? I didn't know this was even possible. Daniela replied to each one. Because the moment her name appeared on that lease, she knew. Her victory had to multiply. She added a new worksheet tab. Rental approval blueprint. Students with no cosigner. And filled it with credit score requirements per borough. Loan acceptance letters as income proof. Sample landlord letter scripts. Lease negotiation tips. Hidden fees to watch for. It wasn't glamorous, but it was gold, because no one had done that for her. Before bed, she lit a single tea candle and opened her notebook. Wrote, I got the apartment. With my name. With no fear. And I did it on a number no one believed in when it was 524. And underneath, there's a girl in high school right now with a debit card and no clue. I'm building the road for her. Then she opened a new page. Title, Next Credit Goal, 700 before graduation. Because yes, she'd done the impossible. But the journey wasn't over. And now, she had a home base. A lease in her name. And the world outside her window, finally hers to walk through. The first thing she noticed about New York wasn't the buildings. It wasn't the yellow taxis or the screech of subway brakes or the smell of hot garbage curling through summer heat. It was the speed. Everything moved, faster. Voices, cars, prices, people. You didn't walk here. You threaded. Between stories, sidewalk cracks, and whatever this city's version of normal was. Daniela Ruiz had landed in Manhattan with a duffel bag, a scholarship folder, and one working credit card. And still, she felt unstoppable. Her apartment was exactly as advertised. 400 square feet of possibility. The radiator wheezed like a jazz singer. The windows didn't fully close. The bed was an inflatable one she ordered from Amazon, arriving 2 days after she did. For those first 2 nights, she slept on a yoga mat. It was humbling. It was cold. It was hers. She opened every box like it was a birthday. Each bowl, each fork, each IKEA shelf ordered off Craigslist with her name in the delivery line. She lined up her notebooks along the single bookshelf, arranged her budgeting binder next to a chipped coffee mug from Boyle Heights. It wasn't comfort yet, but it was home. The first Monday of grad school came fast. She ironed her thrifted button-down shirt, checked her route to campus 3 times, and wore the same shoes she'd walked across Los Angeles in, now treading a different kind of pavement. The Columbia campus loomed elegant, imposing, storied. She felt small, but prepared. Her professors were sharp, the rooms cold, the readings dense. Her fellow students had names like Archer and Callahan and spoke in a kind of academic code she hadn't yet mastered. But she listened. Hard. Took notes like she was learning survival again. Which she was. Different jungle. Same instincts. That Thursday, something happened. She needed a break. Not a breakdown. Just space. Something to reset the ache in her spine and the blur of her eyes. She wandered into a small coffee shop near 122nd Street. One of those brick wall places with exposed beams and baristas who looked like part-time poets. She ordered a lavender oat milk latte. Price, $6.50. It was a splurge. She hesitated before swiping, then pulled out her unsecured Discover card. The same one she'd applied for a year ago. Limit, $500. Balance, $0. Utilization, 0%. She swiped. The terminal beeped. Approved. And something unreal swept through her chest. It wasn't the coffee. It was the calm. The approval. Not the transaction, but the trust. She found a table by the window and stared out at the street. Notebook open, steam curling upward from her cup. This was the moment no one prepared you for. Not the approval. Not the score climbing. But the first time you felt it in your bones. I am no longer afraid of money. She scribbled something in her notebook. This $6.50 means I'm not afraid to live. Not reckless. Not careless. Just free. I can buy a latte without breaking something sacred. I can be here. I earned this. She thought about the years spent studying her bank balance like it was a time bomb. About holding her breath while the card reader thought. About making decisions by subtraction instead of hope. This was different. This was peace. Later that day, she got an alert from her credit card app. Transaction, $6.50. Lavender oat latte, approved. Balance, $6.50. Utilization, 1.3%. Next statement, August 26th. Due, September 18th. Autopay on. She smiled. The math no longer scared her. It empowered her. She spent the next few days adjusting to New York's rhythm. She used her budgeting binder on the subway, tracking each dollar she spent. Used her Freedom Fund to buy a secondhand mini fridge off Facebook Marketplace. She learned which groceries to buy in Harlem versus Midtown. Where to get cheap Wi-Fi. Which laundromat took cards instead of quarters. Which fellow grad students understood what first gen really meant, and which didn't. She made flashcards for policy theory. Started a WhatsApp group for low-income grad students navigating rent. She wasn't just learning. She was leading. One evening, after her last class of the week, she walked into a campus event on first-gen stories. She hadn't planned to speak, but the mic came around, and when it landed in her hand, she didn't freeze. She stood and told them, I used to think building credit was just about a number, but it was about permission. I had to give it to myself before anyone else ever would. Applause, nods, even a tear or two. And when the session ended, a woman from administration approached her. We're launching a financial resilience mentorship program, she said. You belong in it. As a mentor, Daniela blinked, then smiled, and said, yes. That night, she checked her credit score again. 686. She didn't flinch, didn't dance, just nodded, and closed the app, because the number wasn't the main character anymore. She was. She wrote one more thing in her notebook that evening. The city didn't welcome me, but I moved in anyway. One swipe, one breath, one budgeted miracle at a time. The fall semester blurred into a series of deadlines, research labs, and late-night bodega runs. New York was less intimidating now. Still loud, still relentless, but no longer terrifying. Daniela Ruiz had learned how to breathe in the noise. She knew which subway lines skipped her stop, which blocks to avoid at night, which professors expected citations in MLA versus APA, how to decode the price of groceries by borough, how to manage a 16-credit graduate course load with a part-time research position, 2 financial coaching clients, and still get 8 hours of sleep, some nights. She was thriving, but something had changed, and she didn't notice it until one quiet Sunday, sitting cross-legged on her apartment floor with a cup of instant coffee and her favorite blue pen. She opened her budget spreadsheet out of habit, then her credit app. Credit score, 692. She blinked, paused, then felt nothing. No whoop of celebration. No fist pump, just a nod, like closing a book she'd read a dozen times. Because 692 wasn't shocking anymore. It wasn't out of reach. It wasn't a miracle. It was expected. It was normal. And for Daniela, that was revolutionary. She remembered the way her whole body used to react to a credit score update. Back when she lived at 524, and every number defined whether she'd eat, sleep safely, or answer her phone in peace. She used to chase that number like it held her life in its teeth. But now she didn't need it to tell her who she was. That afternoon, she pulled out her notebook. It had grown thick with tape, loose pages, bookmarks, and tiny slips of paper with scribbled grocery math. She flipped through old entries. Utilization must stay under 10%. Pay before statement date. Do not exceed $150 on Discover card. Goodwill letter, draft 3. Freedom fund, $1,000 equals safety. So much of her life had been lived in pursuit of a number. So many of her choices had been dictated by it. And now, on the edge of 700, she was done chasing. She was building, living, leading. The next day, her student mentor group met in the library basement. It was cold, always smelled like coffee and cheap soap. She sat at the front of the table, her hair pulled into a loose bun, hoodie sleeves pushed up, credit curriculum binder in hand. There were 8 students. Freshmen, transfers, returning adults. Every one of them nervous. Every one of them sitting where she had once sat, with cash in their socks, no credit file, and a sinking sense of not knowing where to start. I used to think success was a number, she told them. But success is a system. She wrote on the whiteboard behind her. Safety, choice, dignity. That's what we're building. The score is just a gate. We're tearing down the fence. One student, a tall woman named Jacqueline, raised her hand. How do you stop being scared of looking? Daniela smiled. By looking anyway. Over and over. Until the fear gets bored and leaves. That night, Jacqueline messaged her. Check my score for the first time. 561. Started secured card. I'm doing it. You made it less scary. Thank you. Daniela didn't reply right away. She stared at the message. At the number. She remembered exactly what 561 felt like. The sick twist in your gut. The invisible wall it built between you and legitimate life. And now, she wasn't behind that wall anymore. She was the one building ladders over it. That weekend, she took a walk through Central Park. No headphones. Just leaves and laughter and a city that used to swallow her whole, now parting around her like wind. She sat on a bench and wrote, My credit score is 692, but the number I'm most proud of? Ferment approved for their first cards. $3,000 saved between my students. 2 families applying for item-based reporting. 1 mother who finally has a FICO score. These are my metrics now. These are my numbers. Not numbers I chase. Numbers I raise. The following week, she was asked to speak at a citywide student leadership event. She stood behind a podium in a blazer that didn't quite fit, microphone trembling in her hand. And she said, I used to be ashamed of how little I had. Then I realized the shame belonged to the system, not me. I don't teach budgeting because I love numbers. I teach it because every dollar you control is a piece of power taken back. We don't just deserve seats at the table. We deserve new blueprints entirely. Applause thundered through the room. But she didn't smile until she saw one girl in the back wipe away a tear. Because that moment, that was her new currency. That night, she called her mom. Mommy, she said, I think I'm going to hit 700 soon. Her mom chuckled. You gonna throw a party for that number? Daniela laughed. Nah, I've already got everything I need. Pause. Then Rosa said, You know, I'm up to 659 now. Got a card increase last week. Daniela beamed. Proud of you. You started it, Rosa said. No, Daniela whispered. You did. You just didn't have the tools. I just brought the flashlight. She added 2 new lines to her notebook that night. I don't need 700, but I'll still get there, because I'm not afraid anymore. And underneath, we teach what we've survived, and we survive by teaching. When she checked her credit score the next morning, it had moved. Score, 695. She smiled, closed the app, and went back to writing her next workshop outline, because the number would rise. But it would never matter more than what she did with it. The email came in at 6:57 a.m. Daniela Ruiz was still half asleep, tangled in her thrifted comforter, the soft morning light just beginning to stretch across the windows of her Harlem studio. She wasn't expecting anything. She hadn't checked her credit app in 2 weeks. She didn't need to anymore. She was past that. Or at least, she thought she was. But there it was, glowing quietly on her phone screen. Subject: your credit score has updated. She blinked it away, rolled over, and almost ignored it. Then curiosity nudged her. One tap, one swipe, and there it was. Score: 701. Her breath caught. She stared at the number, not moving, not smiling, just feeling. It wasn't euphoria. It wasn't disbelief. It was quiet, like the moment after a storm, when the sky clears but you're still soaked. She had done it. The number had always felt like a wall. At 524, it was a chain. At 580, a maybe. At 648, a challenge. At 684, a tease. At 695, a waiting room. But 701? That was entry. Not just into better rates or credit card tiers. Into rooms where she no longer had to explain herself. It was a number that meant trust, by a system that once considered her invisible. But that wasn't the real victory. The real victory was that she hadn't needed it to feel whole. The wholeness came before. When she taught her mom how to apply for a secured card. When she walked into Columbia on her own budget. When she paid rent with money she earned and managed on her terms. When she told a room full of scared first years, "You are not your balance." When she bought a coffee without flinching. 701 was the celebration, not the source. She got up, made tea, and sat on the windowsill with her notebook. It was the same spiral-bound journal she'd started nearly 3 years ago. Pages wrinkled, corners dog-eared, covers taped twice. The first entry: I don't know what a credit score really is, but I think it's controlling my life. Now, on the last page, she wrote, 701. It no longer controls me. I control it. And more importantly, I'm helping others take control, too. Later that day, she gave a talk at a youth center in Queens. It was packed. Teenagers with scuffed sneakers and guarded eyes. Some had been in foster care. Others were just trying to get through senior year. She didn't start with a graph. She started with a story. Hers. I used to think credit was only for people with trust funds, she said. People who knew what escrow meant at 14. A few kids laughed. But then I realized it was just a system. And if I could learn it, I could beat it. She showed them screenshots of her old balances. Told them how she'd once cried in a Dollar Tree parking lot when her card declined over a $4 charge. And then she said, my score is over 700 now. But that's not the point. The point is that I'm no longer afraid. And I want that for you. Afterward, a 17-year-old named Elijah approached her. Tight curls, wrinkled hoodie, shoulders tense. My mom got evicted 'cause her credit was messed up, he said. I just thought that's what happened to people like us. Daniela nodded. It happens to people like us because we don't get taught, she said. But that ends with you. She handed him a paper. Your first credit plan. A 1-page blueprint. No jargon. Just steps. Open a secured card with a $200 deposit. Use it for gas or groceries only. Pay it before the statement date. Track your score once a month. Don't let fear keep you in the dark. Elijah took it, held it like something sacred. Can I call you if I mess up? You can call me even if you don't, Daniela smiled. Back home, she added a new tab to her spreadsheet. Youth Credit Program, Pilot Phase. Because she was ready now, not just to talk, to build. Workshops, mentorship pairings, PDF downloads, multilingual guides, partnerships with schools, credit education, before crisis hits. She emailed her Columbia advisor a proposal. The subject line read, Community Credit Initiative, Empowerment Through Education. Her phone pinged 10 minutes later. The response, let's meet. This could be big. The next weekend, she went home to Boyle Heights. Her mom met her at the bus station, holding a sign that said, Bienvenida, 700 Club. They laughed so hard they cried. Over Pozole and Pan Dulce, Rosa pulled out her own phone. Guess what? She beamed. I hit 672. Daniela cheered. They hugged, both knowing what those numbers really meant. Not status. Not approval. Access. Protection. Freedom. Before Daniela left, Rosa handed her a box. Inside, an envelope with handwritten letters Daniela had written as a child. One caught her eye. From age 12. Dear Mommy, one day I'm going to live in a tall building with a mailbox that has my name on it. You won't have to worry about me. I'll be okay. Love, Danny. She folded it carefully, placed it in her wallet, and whispered, "You did okay, kid." The following Monday, her mentor at Columbia introduced her to a nonprofit director downtown. They met at a cafe, talked for 2 hours. By the end, Daniela had a paid consulting offer to develop credit education curriculum for immigrant youth. She said yes without blinking, because this was what she was meant for. Not just beating the system, but rewriting it. That night, she added a final note to her notebook. Score, 701. But this isn't the end. I'm building something bigger than credit. I'm building the confidence to say, I deserve to be here. I belong here. And I'll leave the door open behind me. Then she closed the notebook. Not because the story was done, but because it had become a movement. Daniela didn't build a perfect life. She built a possible one. From 524 to 701, she proved that credit isn't just a number. It's a tool. A tool to protect your dreams, your dignity, and your power. If you're starting from zero, if the system makes you feel small, if you've ever looked at your score and thought, I'm already behind, you are not alone. But now, you're not behind. You're just early. And the first step is knowing your numbers, so you can change them. Subscribe to Dollar by Dollar for more stories like this. Real people, real numbers, real transformation. Your journey starts today. And like Daniela, you don't need a cosigner. You just need a plan.